Imagine you are sitting in class or doing homework, and suddenly a song starts playing in your mind. It is the same tune repeating over and over, even though you are not listening to music. This experience is called an earworm. An earworm is a song or melody that gets stuck in your head and keeps playing on a loop. Earworms usually happen when a part of your brain that processes sound keeps repeating a small section of music. Your brain remembers the song and wants to complete it, even if you are not aware of it. Short, catchy tunes, songs with simple rhythms, or songs you recently heard are more likely to become earworms. The brain fills gaps in memory by repeating fragments of music. This repetition makes the song stay longer in your mind. Research in neuroscience has studied earworms in detail. In 2010, psychologist James Calares conducted experiments and found that songs with simple rhythms and repetitive lyrics are more likely to get stuck in your head. Another study by Likkonen in 2008 showed that earworms are stronger if people recently heard the song or have emotional connections to it. Functional MRI scans have also revealed that the auditory cortex, responsible for hearing, and the motor areas, responsible for predicting movements, are active during earworms. This means your brain almost sings the song even without sound. Cultural studies suggest that earworms are part of social life. People often talk about songs stuck in their heads, share them with friends, or use music to remember important events. Songs that are popular or played repeatedly in media are more likely to become earworms. In everyday life, earworms can be distracting but also helpful. They can improve memory of lyrics, inspire creativity, or make tasks like walking or cleaning more enjoyable. Listening to a different song, doing a task requiring focus, or thinking of another activity can help get rid of them. Understanding earworms helps us see how memory, music, and the brain work together in daily life. Sleepwalking, or somnambulism, is a sleep disorder where a person walks or performs other activities while still asleep. These actions occur during deep sleep, and the person usually has no memory of them. The phenomenon of sleepwalking has been recorded for centuries. Ancient texts describe people walking in their sleep, sometimes performing complex tasks. In the 19th century, sleepwalking was widely discussed by psychologists and physicians as a unique sleep behavior. However, it wasn't until the 20th century that the scientific community began to investigate sleepwalking more seriously. Imagine your brain is like a car's engine. When you're awake, the engine is fully running, keeping everything working smoothly. But when you're asleep, the engine should be idling. However, during sleepwalking, some parts of the brain stay on, while others fall asleep. This causes a person to get out of bed and act out routines or even walk around, all while the brain is not fully awake. Experts believe that sleepwalking happens during deep non-REM sleep, when the brain isn't fully turned off. Stress, sleep deprivation, and certain medications are known to trigger sleepwalking episodes. A study conducted by Dr. Rosalind Cartwright in 1992 focused on the relationship between dreams and sleepwalking. Dr. Cartwright found that stress and emotional disturbances often lead to episodes of sleepwalking, suggesting a link between mental health and sleep behaviors. Sleepwalking can be dangerous as individuals might trip, fall, or even hurt themselves. Ensuring a safe environment, such as locking doors or using barriers, can help prevent accidents. If sleepwalking episodes are frequent, consulting a doctor may help find treatments like improving sleep hygiene or using medications. In many cultures, sleepwalking has been surrounded by myths. Some people believe that sleepwalkers are connected to spirits or otherworldly forces. Modern medicine, however, sees sleepwalking as a physiological condition needing treatment, not superstition. Sleepwalking is a serious but treatable condition, and with awareness, we can prevent harm and find effective solutions. The bandwagon effect is a psychological phenomenon where people do something mainly because many others are doing it. In other words, individuals tend to follow the crowd rather than make independent choices. For example, if a new phone becomes very popular and everyone around buys it, a person may also buy it even if they do not need it. The bandwagon effect often appears in areas like fashion, technology, and social media. Social pressure, fear of missing out, and a desire to fit in are common triggers. Advertising, peer influence, and trending topics can also push people to follow what is popular. The effect works because humans naturally compare themselves to others. When we see many people choosing the same option, we believe it is the correct or best choice. The behavior is reinforced by social approval. For example, likes, shares, and comments online make someone feel accepted. Our brain also prefers low-risk choices, so following a group seems safer. Over time, repeated exposure to what most people are doing strengthens the tendency to conform. This is why bandwagon effects can spread quickly through communities or online networks. Research shows that the brain responds to social influence in measurable ways. A study by Nathaniel K. and colleagues in 2013 used brain scans to observe how people reacted to popular opinions. They found activity in areas related to reward and decision-making, meaning our brain feels good when we agree with what many others do. To reduce the effect, people can pause before deciding, gather independent information, and reflect on their own values. Critical thinking, questioning trends, and seeking advice from trusted sources can help maintain independent choices. The bandwagon effect shows that following the crowd is common, but thinking for yourself leads to better decisions. You are walking into the kitchen to grab your phone. As soon as you step inside, you pause and wonder why you came here. This sudden forgetting is common, and it is called a memory slip. Memory slips often look like small lapses. You might forget a word, lose track of what you were doing, or fail to remember a task for a few seconds. It is not the same as serious memory loss. Most of the time, the memory comes back after a moment. Scientifically, memory slips happen because of how our brain organizes information. The brain stores memories in different parts. When you move from one room to another, your brain creates a mental boundary called an event boundary. This boundary can make it harder to recall what you were thinking before entering. Attention also plays a role. If your mind is focused on many things, it is easier to forget small goals. Stress and fatigue affect memory too, slowing the retrieval of information. The hippocampus, a part of the brain important for memory, works with the prefrontal cortex to manage these memories. Sometimes, the memory is still there but temporarily inaccessible. Certain factors trigger memory slips. Being tired, stressed, or distracted increases their chance. Multitasking, moving between rooms, or handling multiple ideas at once also makes forgetting more likely. Modern research helps explain this clearly. In 2011, Gabriel Radvansky and his team at the University of Notre Dame studied event boundaries. They found that walking through a doorway can reduce recall of intentions from the previous room. Other studies confirm that environmental changes interrupt the brain's focus and memory linking. The main takeaway is that memory slips are normal. They are usually brief and caused by attention shifts, room changes, or stress. Pausing and focusing can often help recover the forgotten thought. The false consensus effect is when people believe that their opinions, beliefs, or behaviors are more common and widely shared by others than they actually are. Imagine you like a particular music genre, say rock music. You may believe that most of your friends also enjoy rock music, even though only a few actually do. This is the false consensus effect in action. The false consensus effect is triggered by personal experience and a tendency to assume that others think similarly. It is also influenced by social groups we interact with. For example, if you spend most of your time with people who share your views, you may believe that your views are universally shared. The effect happens because people tend to overestimate the extent to which their own opinions are shared by others. One reason for this is called availability heuristic. When we make decisions, we often use the information that is most easily available, which is usually our own thoughts and experiences. So, if we believe something, we assume others think the same way simply because we don't have enough diverse viewpoints to challenge our assumptions. This bias is further strengthened by our social circles, which tend to reinforce similar beliefs. Over time, the mind takes these shared beliefs as normal or universal. Studies in neuroscience support this idea. In 2010, researchers led by social psychologist David E. Bones showed that people tend to predict that others would act in ways similar to themselves, leading to false consensus. Brain imaging studies also reveal that areas of the brain linked to self-reflection become activated when forming judgments about others' views, suggesting that we unconsciously project our own views onto others. To reduce the false consensus effect, it helps to seek out diverse perspectives. Actively engage with people who have different opinions and experiences. This practice broadens your understanding and challenges your assumptions. The false consensus effect can limit our view of the world. Being aware of it helps us better understand others' opinions and avoid overgeneralizing our own beliefs. The halo effect is a thinking habit where one positive trait of a person or thing makes us assume other traits are also positive. It creates a small mental glow that spreads farther than it should. People often feel the halo effect when they first notice a pleasing quality. It may be a friendly smile, a neat outfit, or a confident tone. That single detail makes the whole person seem kinder, smarter, or more skilled. The effect works quickly and quietly. It does not ask for proof. It simply fills in the gaps with ideas that feel right. This can happen with strangers, classmates, leaders, or products. The judgment feels natural because it saves time and reduces effort. Still, the picture we form may not match reality. Imagine the brain acting like a flashlight in a dark room. When the light hits one bright spot, the glow makes the whole area seem brighter. The halo effect works in a similar way. The brain likes patterns, so it takes one good trait and uses it to guess other traits. This is a shortcut in thinking. It helps the brain work faster but reduces accuracy. In the body, positive impressions can trigger small emotional reactions, such as a relaxed feeling or a slight rise in trust. These feelings make the first judgment feel even stronger. In cognition, attention moves toward information that agrees with the first impression. At the same time, the brain may ignore information that does not fit the glowing picture. This cycle keeps the halo effect in place. Most people experience the halo effect. It appears in students, adults, professionals, and even experts. It shows up in school, work, marketing, and social life. Thinkers have noticed this bias for many years. Different cultures describe similar ideas, often linked to beauty, status, or first impressions. The halo effect can hide faults, create unfair expectations, and influence choices that should depend on facts. Halo effect teaches us one good trait does not tell the whole story. You are lying in bed, almost awake, when you suddenly realize that the strange place around you is not real at all. You understand you are dreaming, and the moment you know this, the colors sharpen and the space feels clearer. Only at the end of the moment do you recognize the concept of a lucid dream. Lucid dreams feel different from regular dreams. People often sense that the world around them is imaginary. They can sometimes choose what to do or where to go. These dreams usually appear during the rapid eye movement stage of sleep. Many describe the experience as bright, active, and highly memorable. Researchers study how this works in the brain, the body, and thinking processes. In lucid dreams, the prefrontal cortex becomes more active than in normal dreaming. This area helps with decision making and awareness. During sleep, the body stays still because of muscle relaxation, but the mind becomes partly alert. Cognition shifts into a mixed state. The dreamer can reflect on thoughts while the dream continues. A well-known study in 1981 by Stephen LaBerge showed that lucid dreamers could signal they were aware by moving their eyes in set patterns during sleep. This helped scientists prove that people can have conscious control while still fully asleep. Lucid dreams are fairly common. Many people report having at least one in their life. Teens and young adults often have them more than older adults. People who keep dream journals or who practice recall exercises also tend to experience them more often. Different cultures have long described similar dream events. Some ancient groups viewed them as messages. Others used them for spiritual training or imagination practice. Lucid dreams are usually safe, but they can confuse sleep schedules or lead to sleep loss if someone tries too hard to cause them on purpose. A few people may feel brief awakenings with worry. The key idea is that lucid dreams show how the mind can become aware even inside sleep, creating a special mix of dreaming and waking experience. The peek-in rule is a mental shortcut that makes people judge an experience by its strongest moment and by how it ended, instead of the whole event. A person visits an amusement park. Most rides are average, but one ride is extremely exciting and the day ends with a fun parade. Later, the person remembers the trip as very good because of the strong peak and the happy ending. The mind cannot store every part of an event with equal strength. Instead, it forms memory snapshots. One snapshot comes from the most intense moment, which can be either pleasant or unpleasant. Another snapshot comes from the final part of the event. These 2 points act like anchors. They guide later feelings and judgments. People tend to forget long calm stretches and focus on short strong moments. This process reduces mental effort and helps the brain filter information. The peek-in rule also connects with emotional weighting. Strong feelings push the brain to mark certain moments as important. Later recall depends more on emotion than duration or total quality. A well-known study from 1993 by Daniel Kahneman, Barbara Fredrickson, and their team showed this effect clearly. In the cold presser experiment, people placed their hand in icy water. One trial ended at a very painful point. Another trial lasted longer, but ended with slightly warmer water. Most people later chose to repeat the longer trial, even though it involved more total pain. They judged the experience by the peak pain and the ending, not by the full duration. This study provided strong evidence that memory shapes future choices through the peek-in rule. This rule may help people make quick decisions. It lets the mind focus on moments that signal danger or reward without reviewing every detail. Different societies highlight peak moments through rituals, celebrations, or shared stories. These practices reinforce how groups remember events. People judge experiences more by strong moments and final feelings than by full duration. The tip of the tongue phenomenon happens when a person knows a word but cannot recall it immediately. It feels like the word is just out of reach. People often remember the first letter or the sound of the word, but the full word does not come to mind. Cognitively, the tip of the tongue effect happens because our brain stores words in a network. Words are linked by meaning and sound. Sometimes, the connections to a word become weak or temporarily blocked. The brain can access part of the information, like the first letter or how the word sounds, but cannot retrieve the whole word. Stress, fatigue, or distractions can make it harder for the brain to complete the link. Perceptual factors can also play a role. Hearing similar words or seeing letters can help trigger the memory. People are more likely to experience tip-of-the-tongue moments when they are thinking quickly or trying to speak under pressure. Research has found that everyone experiences this effect, but it happens more often as people get older. Studies show that people remember partial information about the word, like its number of syllables or the first sound. Culturally, this phenomenon appears in jokes and literature. Many stories describe characters struggling to find a word, showing that this is a shared human experience. The way people perceive the experience can shape its meaning. Some feel frustrated, while others find it amusing. How we interpret the tip of the tongue state affects whether it becomes a moment of stress or a chance to pause and think. Imagine you walk into a classroom wearing a new bright shirt. You notice a few classmates glancing your way, and suddenly you feel like everyone is staring at you and judging your outfit. This feeling is what psychologists call the spotlight effect. It is the tendency to think that others notice us more than they really do. There are a few types of spotlight effect. One is social spotlight, where you feel watched in public situations. Another is performance spotlight, where you overestimate how much people notice your mistakes or actions. Think of your brain like a security camera system in a building. Each camera is constantly scanning for activity, but it cannot show every detail at once. Similarly, your brain exaggerates your presence, making it feel like you are in the center of attention all the time. Neuroscience shows that regions like the medial prefrontal cortex are active when thinking about how others see us. This area processes self-relevant information and social evaluation. The amygdala may also respond when you feel anxious about being observed. Together, these brain areas create the impression that all eyes are on you, even when they are not. Research by Thomas Gilovich in 2000 demonstrated the spotlight effect clearly. In one experiment, college students wore a funny t-shirt into a room and estimated that about half the people would notice it. In reality, only about 25% did. This shows how people overestimate how much others notice their actions. The spotlight effect is very common and can happen to anyone in social situations, especially in unfamiliar or important settings. Psychological factors such as low self-esteem, social anxiety, or perfectionism make the spotlight effect stronger. People who are more self-conscious often feel under a figurative spotlight. Historically, cultures with strong social norms or collective memory of judgment may enhance this feeling. Communities that emphasize reputation make individuals more aware of potential social scrutiny. The main takeaway is that most of the time, people are not paying as much attention to us as we think. Recognizing this can reduce unnecessary anxiety and help us act more freely in social settings. The curse of knowledge is a cognitive bias where someone who knows something finds it hard to imagine not knowing it. For example, a teacher may explain a topic too quickly because they forget how difficult it is for students to understand. The term curse of knowledge was first introduced by economists Colin Cameron, George Loewenstein, and Martin Weber in 1989. They used it to describe situations where experts assume others have the same information they do. This bias happens because our brains automatically use what we know to understand the world. When we have knowledge, our memory and reasoning focus on that knowledge, making it difficult to think about what it is like not to know it. This affects communication because we may leave out important details or use words and examples that are clear to us but confusing to others. The mind tends to fill gaps with what it already knows, which can create errors in teaching, storytelling, or explaining instructions. People overestimate how much others understand, which leads to misunderstandings. Perception is affected because knowing something changes the way we notice information. Experts focus on details that matter to them, but may ignore what is obvious or confusing to beginners. This can make explanations seem simple to the expert, but unclear to a learner. A famous study by Elizabeth Newton in 1990 called the Tappers and Listeners experiment showed this clearly. People who tapped a song thought listeners could guess it easily, but listeners often failed. This showed that knowing the song made it hard for tappers to imagine not knowing it. The curse of knowledge appears in daily life, such as teachers, parents, or programmers explaining things. It also shows in news reporting, public speeches, and instruction manuals. The curse of knowledge shapes meaning because the way we see information depends on what we know. Our understanding is filtered through prior knowledge, so we may misjudge how clear or meaningful something is to others. The rubber hand illusion is a psychological phenomenon where a person feels that a fake rubber hand is actually part of their own body. This illusion shows how the brain can be tricked by visual and sensory information. The name rubber hand illusion comes from the use of a realistic rubber hand in experiments. In these studies, the rubber hand is placed in front of a participant while their real hand is hidden from view. The term was first used when researchers studied how seeing and feeling touch at the same time can create a sense of ownership over the fake hand. The neural basis of the rubber hand illusion involves the brain combining information from vision, touch, and body position. The parietal lobe helps the brain locate the hand in space, while the premotor cortex contributes to the sense of ownership. When a person sees the rubber hand being stroked while their hidden hand is touched in the same way, the brain merges these signals. For example, if a brush strokes both the hidden real hand and the visible rubber hand at the same time, a person may begin to feel that the rubber hand is their own. This shows that the brain relies on multiple senses to build a body image. Foundational research by Botvinnik and Cohen in 1998 first described the rubber hand illusion in detail. They demonstrated that participants could feel ownership over a rubber hand through synchronous stroking. This study became widely cited in understanding body perception and sensory integration. Historically, illusions of body ownership have been used in art and theater to explore human perception. People have long experimented with mirrors and props to create experiences where the mind is tricked into feeling something that is not real. The rubber hand illusion has important implications for understanding how the brain constructs reality. It shows that what we feel as our body is not fixed, but is created by the brain using sensory information. This insight is useful for rehabilitation, virtual reality, and studying disorders of body perception. Gambler's fallacy is the mistaken belief that past random events affect future random events. It is the idea that if something happens more often than usual, it will happen less in the future, or if it has not happened for a while, it is more likely to happen soon. For example, if a coin has landed on heads 5 times in a row, someone might think tails is due next, even though each flip is independent. Think of it like a roulette wheel. Imagine you see red come up several times in a row. You might feel black is due next. This is how gambler's fallacy works. The brain wants patterns and predicts balance in random events. People often use recent events to estimate future outcomes, even when the events are independent. This happens because the brain struggles to accept true randomness. People focus on streaks and imagine they will reverse, even though probability stays the same every time. Research shows that the human brain is wired to see patterns even where none exist. In a famous study in 1982, psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman demonstrated that people expect short sequences to reflect long-term probabilities. Later neuroscience research revealed that the prefrontal cortex is involved in estimating chance, and it can lead to errors when interpreting random sequences. These findings explain why many gamblers keep betting based on streaks that do not actually affect outcomes. Many cultures link luck with past events. Casinos and gambling traditions encourage belief in streaks and patterns. Superstitions, lucky charms, and number rituals are all ways people try to control randomness, showing how gambler's fallacy is reinforced socially. Gambler's fallacy can affect more than gambling. People make poor decisions in stock trading, sports predictions, or even weather assumptions. Recognizing it can help avoid mistakes and improve decision-making in daily life. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night, your heart racing, sweat on your forehead, and you feel a wave of fear, but when you try to explain it in the morning, you cannot remember a dream. This is what happens during night terrors. Night terrors are sudden episodes of intense fear during sleep, usually affecting children, but sometimes adults too. Typical triggers include sleep deprivation, stress, fever, certain medications, and irregular sleep schedules. Children who sleep in unfamiliar places or experience strong emotions during the day are also more prone to these episodes. Neurologically, night terrors occur during deep non-REM sleep, often in the first third of the night. The brain is partially awake but not fully alert, which causes confusion and intense fear. The amygdala, the part of the brain that controls emotions like fear, becomes highly active, while the prefrontal cortex, which helps rational thinking, is still mostly asleep. Researchers believe the brain fails to transition smoothly between sleep stages. A 2002 study by Guilleminault and colleagues showed that abnormal arousals from deep sleep trigger sudden panic responses. This explains why children may sit up, scream, or even run without any memory afterward. Historically, night terrors were seen as supernatural events. In some cultures, they were thought to be caused by spirits or demons pressing on the chest during sleep. Over time, scientific understanding replaced these beliefs with neurological explanations. Biologically, night terrors may serve as a stress release mechanism during sleep, although excessive episodes can disrupt growth and rest. Guilleminault's 2002 research suggests that frequent night terrors can affect daytime alertness and mood in children. Risks include injury from sudden movements, sleep disruption, and anxiety about sleeping. Adults with night terrors may also develop depression or exhaustion if episodes are frequent. The main takeaway is that night terrors are a real sleep disorder caused by brain activity during deep sleep. They are not dangerous in themselves, but managing stress, maintaining a regular sleep schedule, and seeking help if frequent can reduce their impact. Imagine walking across a hot road on a sunny day. Far ahead, it looks like there is water shimmering on the asphalt. You rush toward it, hoping to cool off, but when you get closer, the water disappears. This trick of light is called a mirage. Think of a mirage like a funhouse mirror in the desert sky. Just as a mirror bends your reflection, the layers of hot and cold air bend light. When light passes through air of different temperatures, it curves. This bending makes the sky appear on the ground, creating an image that is not really there. The brain interprets this light as a real object, even though it is just an optical illusion. Nerve cells in the eyes send signals to the visual cortex, which processes shapes and colors. The neurons try to make sense of the unusual light paths, producing a coherent scene. This is why you see water or distant lakes that do not exist. Early studies of mirages were documented by Jean Daniel Colladon in 1836, who carefully measured light bending in heated air. Later, researchers like A. Fresnel in the 1820s and 1830s studied the wave nature of light to explain optical phenomena. These studies showed that light does not always travel straight, and that temperature layers can create illusions, helping us understand why desert travelers often reported seeing phantom lakes. Historically, mirages have appeared in stories and myths. Desert travelers in Africa and the Middle East often described mirages as spirits or omens, while sailors reported phantom islands in the ocean. These cultural interpretations show how humans tried to explain natural illusions before the science was clear. Mirages remind us that perception is not always reality. Our brain builds a mental image from the light it receives. When conditions are unusual, like hot air layers bending light, the image can be false. This teaches that seeing does not always mean believing, and our experience of the world depends on how the brain interprets sensory signals. You wake up in the middle of the night lying on your back. You are fully awake, but your body does not move. A heavy pressure rests on your chest. You might even see shadows or feel like someone is in the room. This frightening experience is called sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis happens when your brain and body are not in sync during sleep. Normally, when you are in rapid eye movement sleep, or REM, your brain is active, and your body is relaxed to prevent you from acting out your dreams. Sometimes, your mind wakes up before your body. For example, a teenager might wake to answer a phone call and notice they cannot move for several seconds. This happens because the brain signals that control movement are still turned off. Stress, lack of sleep, and irregular sleep schedules can make it more likely. Scientific studies have confirmed the reality of sleep paralysis. One famous study by Dr. John Shane in 1999 observed that about 40% of people experience sleep paralysis at least once in their life. Researchers recorded brain activity using EEG and found that the body's muscles remain paralyzed even when the mind is awake. Other experiments have shown that sleep deprivation increases the chances of these episodes. These findings show that sleep paralysis is a real biological event, not a supernatural occurrence. Throughout history, many cultures have explained sleep paralysis in supernatural ways. In Europe, people spoke of witches sitting on the chest. In Japan, it was called kanashibari, believed to be caused by spirits. These interpretations show how humans tried to explain the unexplainable before science. Sleep paralysis can also appear with narcolepsy or other sleep disorders. Understanding it helps reduce fear and teaches us how sleep affects the brain and body. Sleep paralysis is a natural sleep phenomenon. Recognizing it can help people cope calmly instead of fearing it. You are watching a scary movie, alone in a dark room. A sudden scene flashes on the screen, catching you off guard for a moment. Tiny bumps rise on your arms, and a shiver runs down your spine. This reaction is called goosebumps. It happens to everyone, but most people do not know why. Goosebumps occur when tiny muscles at the base of each hair, called erector pili muscles, tighten. This is similar to how a cat's fur stands up when it is frightened. The tightening makes the hair stand upright, creating the bumpy skin effect. This reaction is part of the body's natural alarm system. It is linked to the fight or flight response, which prepares your body to face danger. The brain sends signals to the nervous system, causing the muscles to contract. Even though humans do not have enough body hair for it to keep us warm or make us look bigger, the mechanism still works, showing how evolution leaves traces in our bodies. Researchers have studied this phenomenon scientifically. In 2003, psychologist Satoshi Kanazawa observed that people experience goosebumps more often during emotional moments, such as hearing music or feeling fear. Earlier, in 1982, Eckhard Fried showed through experiments that sudden cold or fear could trigger the erector pili muscles. Studies consistently confirm that goosebumps are a real, measurable reaction of the body to emotional or physical stimuli. In ancient times, people believed goosebumps meant spirits were near or that the body was trying to absorb energy. Different cultures connected this reaction to awe, fear, or even excitement. Goosebumps can happen in many situations, like listening to emotional music, remembering a sad moment, or feeling inspired. It is not only linked to fear or cold. Goosebumps show how the body connects feelings and physical reactions, a reminder of how deeply emotions affect us. Imagine one night you are asleep, and your roommate hears you talking about a meeting you do not remember. You wake up the next morning with no memory of saying a single word. This is an example of sleep talking, also known as somniloquy, where a person speaks aloud while sleeping without being aware of it. Sleep talking can happen during any stage of sleep, often during light sleep, and usually lasts only a few seconds or minutes. People rarely remember these episodes. Sleep talking can occur occasionally or frequently, and it is more common in children than adults. Think of the brain as a theater. During sleep, some parts of the stage are dark, while others are still lit. Sleep talking happens when the areas controlling speech are active, even though the conscious mind is asleep. Neurologically, it involves activation of the speech centers in the brain while the prefrontal cortex, which controls reasoning and memory, is offline. Psychologically, stress, fatigue, or emotional tension can increase episodes. Studies in sleep research suggest that sleep talking may reflect processing of daily experiences. Sleep talking is sometimes linked with other sleep behaviors. According to a 2011 study by Drive Mark Mahold, people with REM sleep behavior disorder, sleepwalking, or night terrors often talk during sleep. Medications, fever, or substance use can also trigger episodes. Understanding sleep talking can influence how we perceive sleep. Hearing someone speak while asleep shows that the brain continues to process thoughts even when we are unaware. This highlights that sleep is not just rest, but also a period of complex mental activity. Have you ever had one bad experience at school or work, and no matter how many positive moments you had, that one negative memory stuck with you the most? It might have been a bad test score, a harsh comment from someone, or an argument that you couldn't forget. Even if your day was filled with good things, that one bad moment might seem to overshadow everything else. This happens because of something called negativity bias. Negativity bias means that negative events, feelings, or thoughts have a greater impact on our memory than positive ones. For example, if you receive both compliments and criticism, the criticism is likely to stick in your mind more strongly. This bias can make you dwell on unpleasant experiences, making them feel more important than positive experiences. The brain processes negative information differently from positive information. When we encounter something negative, our brain reacts more intensely to it. This is partly due to evolution. Long ago, negative events, like threats or danger, required more attention to help us survive. Our brain's fight or flight response makes us pay more attention to potential dangers. As a result, negative memories tend to be stored more deeply, making them easier to recall. This system can still affect how we react to situations today, even when there is no immediate danger. Negativity bias is common in everyone, but certain factors make it stronger. Stress, anxiety, and depression can amplify this bias, making negative memories more dominant. People who have experienced trauma are also more likely to focus on negative memories, as their brains are conditioned to be on alert for danger. In many cultures, focusing on negative experiences has been seen as a way to learn and grow. Cultures that emphasize survival, responsibility, and caution might place more value on remembering negative experiences to avoid harm. Negativity bias can affect how we interact with others and see the world. If we only focus on negative memories, it might shape how we perceive future experiences. This bias can influence decisions, relationships, and even our overall well-being. Déjà vu is the feeling that you have experienced a situation before, even when it is happening for the first time. It is a brief, and sometimes strange sense of familiarity that can be surprising or confusing. For example, imagine walking into a new classroom for the first time. You notice the desks, the teacher, and the students, and suddenly you feel as if you have been in this exact room before. The feeling may last only a few seconds, but it can be very strong. People often describe it as strange, familiar, or even eerie. It can happen in everyday situations, such as meeting someone new, visiting a place, or having a conversation. Scientists study déjà vu to understand how the brain processes memory. One explanation is that it happens when the brain mistakes the present for the past. The temporal lobe, a part of the brain that handles memory, may create a small error. This error makes the current moment feel like a memory. Another idea is that déjà vu occurs when attention and perception are slightly out of sync. For example, if the brain processes information twice very quickly, the second time may feel familiar. Scientific studies confirm this. In 2003, researchers Adachi and Tsukahara studied patients with temporal lobe epilepsy. They found that many patients experience déjà vu right before a seizure. This shows that the temporal lobe plays a key role in producing the feeling. Other studies using brain scans also show increased activity in memory-related areas during déjà vu. The first use of the term déjà vu was by the French researcher Émile Boirac in 1876. Earlier, Saint Augustine around 400 AD described experiences similar to false memories, showing that people have long noticed this unusual feeling. Déjà vu is generally safe and does not signal illness for most people. Understanding it helps researchers learn about memory and brain function. It gives insight into how the brain organizes experiences and detects patterns, showing the complex dynamics of perception and memory. Microhallucination is a phenomenon where a person briefly sees something very small that is not actually there. It is usually fleeting and often goes unnoticed by others. For example, someone might see a tiny glowing dot moving across the corner of their eye for a few seconds, then it disappears. Typical triggers include fatigue, stress, sleep deprivation, or prolonged focus on a screen. Bright lights or sudden changes in the environment can also make these tiny illusions appear. Sometimes, it happens when a person is daydreaming or their mind is very tired. Neurological basis can be compared to static on a television screen. Just as the TV can show tiny flashes of static even when there is no signal, the brain can generate brief visual flashes without actual external input. Microhallucinations often involve the visual cortex and the brain regions responsible for attention and perception. When neurons fire spontaneously or in unusual patterns, they can create images that seem real. Studies of neural activity show that the brain constantly predicts what it expects to see. If there is a mismatch between expectation and actual input, the brain may create tiny, imagined visuals. Chemical changes in the brain, such as altered dopamine or serotonin levels, can also increase the likelihood of seeing these brief illusions. Historical and cultural framing shows that small visual hallucinations have been noted for centuries. Ancient texts from Greece and China describe people seeing small sparks or moving lights before sleep or during fasting. Many cultures interpreted these microvisions as messages from spirits or signs of the future. Biological implications suggest that microhallucinations help the brain stay alert to subtle changes. A well-known study by Charles Bonnet in 1760 showed that people with vision loss sometimes see tiny shapes or patterns. This may help the brain maintain visual processing even with limited input. Takeaway: microhallucinations are brief, harmless flashes of perception that reflect how the brain predicts and interprets the world. Sometimes we hear someone's name wrong. This can happen when a person says a name and we think we heard something different. It might be small, like calling John as John, or bigger, like calling Samantha as Christina. Most people have experienced this at least once. Neuroscience explains this as the brain trying to process sounds quickly. The auditory cortex in the brain receives sound signals and sends them to areas that recognize language, like Wernicke's area. If there is background noise, or if the name is unusual, the brain may guess what it thinks it heard. A well-known study by Samuel and Cat, 1998, showed that people often mishear words or names when the brain fills gaps in incomplete sounds. Memory also plays a role. If a name is similar to a name we already know, the brain might replace it automatically. Culturally, mishearing names can have different meanings. In some societies, it is seen as a small mistake or funny moment. In others, it can be seen as disrespectful. For example, in Japanese culture, careful pronunciation of names shows respect. Mishearing may cause embarrassment or social tension. This is different from forgetting a name or intentionally giving someone a nickname. Forgetting is a memory lapse, while mishearing happens while hearing the name for the first time. Mispronunciation by the speaker is also different. Mishearing is about how the listener's brain interprets sounds. It usually happens in noisy places, when people speak quickly, or with uncommon names. Studies on speech perception show that people with hearing difficulties or attention problems may mishear names more often. Clinically, repeated mishearing of names could indicate auditory processing issues. Researchers like Samuel and Kat highlight that it is a normal human error, but can become significant if frequent. Mishearing names is a common brain process influenced by sound, memory, and culture. Imagine standing in a quiet room. You tap your finger on a table and wait for the tiny sound it makes. The sound reaches you fast, but the feeling in your fingers seems a little late. The delay is called sensory lag. Long ago, many cultures noticed delays in body signals. Greek writers spoke of slow responses during sickness. Medieval scholars in the Middle East noted that cold air seemed to slow touch. Here is a simple example. When you place your hand in warm water, you sense pressure first and heat later. Your mind joins these pieces into one moment, but each type of signal travels at its own speed. The math and logic behind sensory lag focus on signal time. Nerve fibers carry touch at different speeds. Fast fibers send pressure. Slow fibers send temperature or pain. If speed is distance divided by time, then even a small change in distance or fiber type adds delay. The brain also waits for enough signals to build one clear picture. This waiting creates a few milliseconds of lag. Delay is tiny. Modern studies support this idea. In 2005, neuroscientist Patrick Haggard showed that the brain often shifts the order of touch events to keep our sense of time steady. Today, many people report small delays while using phones or VR gear, which shows that our timing system adapts to new tools. In psychology, sensory lag is seen as a normal part of perception. The brain edits signals so the world feels smooth and stable. This gives a clear meaning. Lag is not a flaw. It is the way the mind keeps order. The takeaway is simple. Touch feels late because the brain works to shape a steady story. A random motor error is a sudden movement of the hand or foot that happens without planning. The person does not intend the action, and it often feels as if the body moved on its own. This type of error begins in the communication system between the brain, spinal cord, and muscles. Normally, motor signals follow a steady path. When there is noise in the system, the signal may fire early, late, or at the wrong strength. This can come from small shifts in neuron activity, changes in attention, or delays in sensory feedback. In the middle of this process, an example can help. A student may rest a foot on the floor, but a tiny misfire in the motor cortex makes the foot tap once without warning. The student feels surprised, even though the movement lasts only a moment. Motor errors also appear when the brain predicts one action, but the body prepares another. The mismatch creates a brief conflict, and the extra signal can escape before it is corrected. These events show how the motor system is always adjusting and may release a movement when the balance is off. Early work by Wilder Penfield in 1937 used direct brain stimulation to show that small areas of the motor cortex can cause sudden movements with very light activation. This well-known research helped scientists understand how minor shifts in neural firing can produce unexpected actions. In the past, sudden movements were often linked to outside forces or strong emotion. Many traditions viewed them as signs of stress or fear. Some early medical writers described brief twitches as normal body events that showed changing energy or mood. Today, these errors are seen as part of everyday motor control. They remind us that the brain works with constant prediction and correction. When a random movement appears, it shows how active the system is. People may build personal meaning around the event, but the action itself is usually a small signal mistake. The unrealistic expectation glitch is a thinking mistake where someone predicts a result that does not match real conditions. The person expects something much better or much faster than what is possible. This creates a gap between hope and reality. The idea grew inside early psychology discussions in the mid-20th century. Researchers noticed that many people expected perfect outcomes even when evidence showed limits. Over time, teachers and counselors began using the phrase unrealistic expectation glitch to explain this common problem in simple language. It spread through education programs in the 1980s and 1990s because it helped young learners understand why predictions sometimes fail. The glitch is linked to how the human brain tries to save time. Instead of measuring every detail, the brain uses quick rules to fill in missing information. These rules help with fast decisions, but they can also produce errors. When a person imagines a future event, the brain often highlights the best parts and hides the hard parts. The person then believes the future will follow the easy picture inside the mind. Memory also plays a role. The brain often remembers strong moments and forgets slow or difficult steps. This makes the future look smoother than it really is. Social pressure and personal emotions can also push the brain to choose the most hopeful path, even when facts suggest a different outcome. All these processes work quietly, so the person does not notice the glitch forming. Bright images, fast stories, and repeated success examples can make the glitch stronger. When someone sees only the final result of others, they miss the hidden effort behind it. Many school projects, talent shows, and sports events show this glitch when students expect instant success without steady practice. A person's view of hard work, time, and difficulty shapes how they read a situation. If the view is too simple or too hopeful, the meaning shifts and the unrealistic expectation glitch appears. On a quiet afternoon, you sit by a window and try to focus on one thought. Yet inside your mind, several lines of inner speech begin to move at the same time. One voice plans what to cook, another replays a memory, and a softer one worries about tomorrow. They rise together like overlapping sounds from different rooms. Only after a moment do you notice that this mix is not coming from outside. It is your internal voice system working in parallel. Think of this system like a small group of musicians practicing in one hall. Each player knows a different melody. Your brain tries to guide all of them, but sometimes the sounds overlap. This happens because the human mind can activate several thought streams at once. Working memory holds short pieces of information in separate mental spaces. Attention tries to choose one stream, but the unused streams do not turn off. They keep running in the background. When stress, tiredness, or strong emotions raise activity in these circuits, the streams can feel louder and more crowded. None of these voices are external. They are inner speech patterns created by normal brain processes that mix planning, memory, and self-talk. A well-known study by Charles Ferneyhoff in 2004 explored how inner speech often shifts between single and multiple strands. The research showed that the brain regions used for ordinary language, such as the left inferior frontal gyrus, also support imagined speech. Later experiments using fMRI found that when people report layered inner voices, their language networks show overlapping activation patterns. These results suggest that multiple inner speech streams are common rather than unusual. Parallel inner voices help the mind plan, compare ideas, and solve problems by testing several options at once. Some cultures see rich inner dialogue as creativity, while others view it as a sign of worry. Both views reflect social ideas about thinking styles. Hearing several inner voices at once is usually a normal sign of a busy, active mind. Overfamiliarity glitch is a moment when something normal suddenly feels strange. A familiar object, place, or word begins to look unfamiliar. It creates a small feeling of confusion because the brain expects comfort, but instead notices something odd. Early work on this type of feeling appeared in 1906 in a study by the psychologist Hugo Münsterberg. He explored how simple words or actions can feel odd when repeated many times. Later, in the 1960s, Leon Jakubowicz and James Lambert published research on what they called semantic satiation. They showed that repeating a word again and again can make its meaning fade for a short time. These studies helped shape modern ideas about why normal things sometimes feel uncanny. The overfamiliarity glitch happens because the brain uses fast pattern matching systems. When something is familiar, the brain processes it quickly. If the input repeats too often, or if attention shifts for a moment, the brain reduces its response. This weak response can make something familiar feel wrong. The brain also depends on networks that hold meaning, shape, and memory together. When these networks lose balance even for a second, the brain stops linking the object with past experience. This small break can feel like a short pause in understanding. It is not dangerous. It is simply a sign that the brain is trying to reset its processing so that meaning stays clear. Many people notice this when they stare at a word for too long or when they move through a routine without thinking. Writers and artists have used this strange feeling to make readers slow down and think. Some poems repeat words to disturb normal meaning. Some artworks repeat shapes to create mild unease. The glitch shows that meaning is active, not fixed. The brain must constantly refresh links between memory and perception. When these links slip, even for a moment, understanding becomes unstable. This teaches us that meaning depends on attention and balance. In a room, a face can appear that seems strangely familiar. At first, nothing clicks, and the features remain unplaced in memory. Hours later, the name might suddenly surface, or the mind connects the person to a past encounter. This phenomenon is delayed recognition, when familiarity is noticed only after a short or long delay. The term delayed recognition comes from early psychological studies in the 19th century. Psychologists like Hermann Ebbinghaus observed that memory and recognition do not always happen immediately. He noticed that sometimes people could recall information or identify something familiar after a gap of time, even if they failed to do so at first. This delayed response helped researchers understand that recognition and memory involve multiple processes in the brain, not just instant recall. It's like a filing cabinet. A folder may sit on the shelf, but its label or contents might not be remembered at first. Later, when thinking about the topic or seeing a related folder, the label suddenly comes to mind. This is similar to how delayed recognition works. Information is processed in stages. Sensory input, attention, and memory storage interact before familiarity becomes clear. Sometimes distractions or incomplete processing slow this recognition. Perception and attention also influence delayed recognition. If you glance at something quickly, your brain may not fully process it. Familiarity is stored, but you only recognize it after thinking about it again. Cultural and social context matters too. Faces, symbols, or objects familiar in one culture may not trigger delayed recognition in another. Social experiences can shape what we notice immediately and what appears familiar later. Finally, perception shapes meaning. Delayed recognition shows that our understanding of the world is not always instant. We interpret and assign meaning over time, combining memory, context, and experience to recognize what is familiar. Walking down the street, the name of a childhood friend can suddenly appear in the mind. It arrives clearly and unexpectedly, without any effort to recall it. This experience is called a random fact pop, when trivial knowledge surfaces without warning. Key experimental or research findings. In 1975, a famous study by Roger Brown and David McNeil explored the tip of the tongue phenomenon, which is closely related to random fact pops. They asked participants to recall uncommon words and noticed that sometimes the knowledge came suddenly after a delay. The research showed that the brain stores information even when it is not actively thinking about it. Later studies confirmed that random knowledge surfacing often happens after a period of distraction or relaxation, suggesting that the mind continues processing information in the background. It's like a library where books are stored on high shelves. Sometimes you cannot reach a book directly, but a gentle breeze shakes the shelf, and the book falls into your hands. Similarly, random fact pops happen because your memory connections are constantly being searched unconsciously. Neural pathways that link pieces of information get activated by small cues, and suddenly the fact appears. These sudden knowledge flashes help people make decisions quickly or solve problems without spending time searching actively. They keep the mind flexible and ready for unexpected challenges. In many cultures, sudden thoughts are seen as signs of intuition or inspiration. A fact that pops up in one situation may not appear in another. The environment can trigger the mind to recall certain knowledge. Once the fact surfaces, your brain often reconstructs the memory around it, filling in details you may have forgotten. Random fact pops show that your mind works even when you are not paying attention, revealing the hidden power of memory. Entering a classroom to find a seat, it is possible to reach the wrong row. Later, one might confidently tell a friend the desk is on the left, when it was actually on the right. This phenomenon is called a spatial echo, where memory of a place or layout is inaccurate. Spatial echo appears when you recall places differently than they actually are. You might remember doors, windows, or furniture in the wrong spots. Sometimes, always seem longer or shorter in your mind. People notice it when navigating familiar places or giving directions and realize their memory does not match reality. It's like a camera with film. Every time you walk through a space, your brain records details, like a map in the game. But sometimes the map gets blurry or mixed up. Neurons in the hippocampus, a part of the brain responsible for memory, send signals to the parietal lobe, which helps with spatial awareness. If signals are weak, overlapping, or affected by stress, the map your brain creates may shift. This causes spatial echo, where you recall places incorrectly even though you have been there before. Several factors influence spatial echo. Age can slow memory formation. Fatigue, distraction, and stress can make recalling layouts harder. Changes in environment or moving objects can also create false memories of a space. Cultural and social experiences affect it too. People raised in cities with complex street layouts may have stronger spatial mapping skills than those from rural areas. Stories, maps, and directions shared in a group can also shape individual memory. Modern science has studied this in detail. In 2000, researcher Eleanor Maguire conducted experiments on London taxi drivers and found that their hippocampi were more developed than average. This suggests that repeated navigation changes how the brain stores spatial memory. Errors like spatial echo occur when the brain misinterprets or updates these mental maps incorrectly. The key insight is that our memory of space is flexible, not perfect. We may trust it, but mistakes like spatial echoes show that our brain sometimes rewrites the map incorrectly. Staring at a bright light, such as the sun reflecting off water, and then closing the eyes can leave a faint image floating in front of vision. This lingering picture is called a visual afterimage, something that can be noticed by anyone who pays attention. The experience of an afterimage usually appears as a shadow or a reverse color version of what you were looking at. For example, looking at a red apple for a while may leave a greenish shape on your eyelids when you close your eyes. These images can last for a few seconds to a minute. They are often more visible after staring at bright colors or lights. Your eyes work like a camera, and the retina acts as film. When light hits the retina, the cells called photoreceptors absorb it and send signals to your brain. If the light is very bright or constant, the photoreceptors get tired and continue to send a weak signal even after you look away. This is like pressing a key on a piano hard and letting it echo a little after you release it. Your brain then interprets this lingering signal as a faint image. Both the retina and the brain work together to create this effect. Visual afterimages can happen to anyone, but they are more noticeable in bright lighting or after looking at strong colors. Children and adults alike experience them. Throughout history, afterimages have been noticed by scientists and artists. Early experiments helped us understand how the eye and brain process light and color. In most cases, afterimages are harmless. They are a normal part of how vision works. Afterimages reveal how our eyes and brain continue to process visual information even when the original image is gone. Paying attention to them shows the incredible way our senses work together. You are standing in a bookstore, flipping through a novel. At the same moment, a stranger nearby picks up a different book and comments about the exact idea you were thinking. Two minds reaching the same point without planning. Thought duplication often looks like sudden mental overlap. You may think something and immediately hear someone else say it, or notice the same idea forming in two different parts of your mind. It can feel startling, confusing, or even magical. Usually, the duplicated thought is short, simple, and clear. Think a morning routine. You brush your teeth, make coffee, and check messages at the same time, but sometimes two activities finish together perfectly, like checking emails while your coffee is ready. In the same way, your brain processes multiple streams of information. Neurons fire in networks, and when two pathways converge on the same thought, duplication occurs. Mirror neurons, which react when we see or hear someone else do something, may also play a role. This neural overlap can make it feel like the thought was shared instantly. Certain factors make thought duplication more likely. Stress, fatigue, and close social connections can trigger it. Spending time with someone often leads to similar thinking patterns. Historically, cultures described shared or simultaneous thoughts as telepathy or spiritual connection. Ancient Greek philosophers and some Eastern traditions believed minds could touch without words. Modern science studies this through cognitive psychology. In 2010, psychologist Michael Gazzaniga found that the brain's hemispheres can generate similar ideas independently. Research by Wegner in 2002 on thought monitoring showed that when people expect to share ideas, duplication occurs more often. Thought duplication is a normal brain phenomenon. It shows how connected our minds can be, especially under stress or shared experiences, and reminds us that sometimes thinking alike is just how brains naturally work. You are in a busy classroom, talking to friends, when suddenly your teacher calls your name. For a moment you freeze. Your mind seems to take longer than usual to recognize that it is you being called. This strange pause is called name trigger lag, a slow recognition when someone says your name. Your brain works like a busy supermarket checkout. Each sound from your ears is like a customer in line. Sometimes a line moves slowly, so it takes a little longer for everyone to be served. In the same way, your brain may take a moment to connect the sound of your name with you. Physiological triggers include the loudness of the voice, the pitch, and whether it comes from a familiar person. Your attention level also matters. If you are distracted or thinking deeply, recognition may slow down. Historical observations go back to early psychology studies in the 19th century. Researchers noticed that people sometimes fail to respond immediately to their names in experiments testing attention and reaction times. These patterns suggested that sensory and cognitive systems interact in complex ways. Modern neuroscience supports this. A famous study by Kathleen McDermott in 2001 used brain imaging to show that the auditory cortex and prefrontal cortex work together when hearing your name. Functional MRI studies reveal that familiar voices activate memory and self-processing regions. The brain processes your name faster when you are alert, but delays occur when attention is divided or sensory signals are weak. Cultural interpretations also exist. In some traditions, delayed response to one's name is linked to mindfulness or deep thought. Philosophers have suggested it reflects the way consciousness separates awareness from external stimuli. Understanding name trigger lag helps us learn about the sensory system. It shows that hearing is not automatic. Recognition depends on attention, memory, and brain networks. This helps explain why sometimes even something as familiar as your own name can take a moment to reach your awareness. Upon waking, a conversation with a friend from the night before can seem perfectly clear. Hours later, recalling it again may make some words, gestures, or even the order of events feel different. This change in memory over a few hours is called memory drift. Memory drift is different from forgetting. Forgetting means you cannot recall something at all. Memory drift means you recall it, but the details slowly shift. It is also different from lying or imagining. In memory drift, your brain truly believes the altered memory is accurate. Your brain works like a chalkboard. Every time you recall a memory, it is like tracing over chalk lines. Small smudges or new marks appear, slightly changing the original drawing. Physiologically, memory drift is influenced by how the brain stores and updates information. Neurons in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex work together to retrieve memories. Each recall session activates chemical signals like glutamate, which strengthen some connections but weaken others. Stress, fatigue, and attention can increase these small changes, causing memory details to blur or shift. Hormones like cortisol can speed up memory drift. High stress or excitement releases more cortisol, making some details fade while others seem sharper. Culture and society also affect how we remember. Shared stories, social media, or repeated conversations can reshape our memory to match others' versions. Modern science has studied this carefully. Elizabeth Loftus, in the 1990s, showed that memories of events could be subtly altered by new information. Participants remembered seeing objects that were not there or misremembered actions. Her work shows memory drift is not rare, but a common feature of human memory. Memory drift changes how we perceive our experiences. We may feel confident about details that never happened exactly as we remember. Understanding it helps us be more careful when relying on memory for important decisions or storytelling. While sitting in class, trying to complete homework mentally, a thought can pause mid-sentence. The inner voice may stop, leaving the sentence unfinished. This phenomenon, called inner monologue skipping, occurs when the mind halts a thought before it forms words. Your mind is like a train moving along tracks. Normally, your thoughts travel smoothly like the train, reaching the station as full sentences. Inner monologue skipping happens when the train suddenly jumps off the track. The train is still moving, but words are left behind. Scientists have studied this phenomenon. In 2013, psychologists Hurlbert and Actor asked volunteers to report their thoughts in real time. They found many people often experience unfinished thoughts. Another study in 2017 by Schooler and Smallwood measured brain activity while participants read texts. They discovered moments when the brain was active, but no words were formed in the mind. These experiments confirm that skipping in inner speech is a real, measurable effect. The neural basis involves the prefrontal cortex and language networks. The prefrontal cortex plans and organizes thoughts, while the Broca's area prepares words for speech. Sometimes these areas do not coordinate fully. Signals may be interrupted or delayed, leaving a thought incomplete. Neurotransmitters, like dopamine, also influence how smoothly thoughts flow. Inner monologue skipping does not only happen in thinking tasks. People notice it when reading, daydreaming, or even talking to themselves quietly. Writers, students, and anyone under stress may experience this more often. Inner monologue skipping is a normal brain event. It is not a failure of thinking. The mind sometimes pauses words while thoughts continue. Understanding this helps you recognize that unfinished thoughts are part of how the brain works. You are staring at a patterned wall in a waiting room. For a few moments, the lines seem to shift or ripple as if the wall is moving. You know it is still, but your eyes insist it is dancing. This is called illusory motion, where a static object appears to move. The study of illusory motion began in the 20th century when scientists noticed that certain patterns could trick the brain. Early research focused on optical illusions in art and psychology experiments. Artists like Bridget Riley used repeating shapes and colors to make pictures seem alive. These illusions show that movement is not always a property of objects, but a result of perception. Your eyes act like a camera trying to capture a fast-moving scene. When your brain receives information from patterns that have small differences in brightness, color, or shape, it predicts motion. This prediction can be wrong, and the brain interprets still images as moving. The tiny shifts in your eye muscles, combined with the way neurons in your visual cortex process contrast and lines, create the feeling of movement. This is why the wall or the patterned image seems to float, twist, or vibrate even though nothing is changing. Scientists call this effect motion perception error. It happens because your brain is constantly trying to make sense of visual information, often filling gaps with movement. Illusory motion also appears in culture and design. Some traditional textiles and modern digital graphics use patterns that seem to shimmer or move. Advertisers use this effect to grab attention. In games and movies, these illusions enhance the sense of action without actual motion, showing that humans are naturally drawn to images that challenge perception. What you see is not always real. Your brain interprets patterns, and sometimes adds motion where there is none. Understanding illusory motion helps us realize that vision is not just about eyes, but about the brain making sense of the world. Holding an empty box, it can suddenly feel heavy, as if something is inside. The grip may be adjusted with a small strain, yet the box remains empty. This unusual experience is called phantom weight, the sensation of weight where there is none. Think of it like a computer receiving the wrong signals from a mouse. The mouse moves in one direction, but the screen shows another. In phantom weight, your brain receives signals that tell it muscles are working harder than they really are. These signals come from the nerves that carry information about muscle tension and joint position. When your brain misreads them, it creates the feeling of extra weight. Physiologically, your body responds as if the weight were real. Your muscles may tighten slightly, and your heart rate might increase a little. Even your balance can shift as you adjust to the imagined load. Your nervous system is tricked into preparing the body for a task that does not exist. Historically, scientists first studied phantom weight in the 19th century when patients reported feeling weights attached to missing limbs after amputation. Early researchers thought it was purely psychological, but later studies using nerve stimulation and brain scans showed that these sensations have a real physiological basis. The brain itself can produce a sense of weight from signals that are misinterpreted or absent. The core implication is that our perception of reality can be shaped entirely by the brain, even when the body is not actually experiencing it. Phantom weight shows that sensation is not always a direct reflection of the physical world. It reminds us that what we feel can sometimes be created entirely inside our minds. While trying to split a pizza evenly among 4 friends, the mind can feel foggy and the eyes heavy. Simple calculations that usually take seconds may suddenly become confusing. This happens when tiredness affects the brain, making small mental tasks feel like climbing a mountain. Common causes of sleepy miscalculations include staying up too late, working long hours, skipping sleep, or using devices late at night. Stress and irregular sleep patterns also make it harder for your brain to focus on even simple tasks. Think a smartphone. When the battery is full, apps run smoothly, and calculations are fast. But when the battery is low, apps lag, some fail, and even small tasks take longer. Fatigue works the same way. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and problem solving, slows down when you are tired. Neural connections fire less efficiently, short-term memory weakens, and attention drifts. This slows down the processing of numbers and steps in a calculation. You may know the answer, but retrieving it becomes difficult. Modern neuroscience shows this clearly. In a 2013 study, Matthew Walker, a sleep scientist at UC Berkeley, found that people who were sleep-deprived made 50% more errors in math tests compared to those who had a full night of rest. The study shows that even a single night of poor sleep affects the brain's ability to manage numbers and logical thinking. To cope with this, experts recommend short naps, consistent sleep schedules, and reducing distractions when doing math or other focused tasks. Drinking water, moving around, or taking brief breaks can also help the brain function better. The core implication is clear. Sleep is not just rest. It is a tool for clear thinking. When tired, even simple math can trick you. Prioritizing rest keeps your mind sharp and prevents small mistakes from becoming bigger problems. Imagine sitting in class and suddenly bursting into laughter without any clear reason. Your friends stare, and you feel confused. This is called a random laughter glitch, where the brain triggers laughter seemingly out of nowhere. Certain medical conditions, like epilepsy or multiple sclerosis, can also make laughter appear unexpectedly. Even strong memories or small triggers in the environment, like a familiar sound or a thought, can start this laughter. For example, laughter can suddenly happen when we remember an old funny moment shared with friends, a meme we saw on our phone, or any other funny event from the past. The brain can act like a swing in a playground, normally moving only when pushed. Sometimes, it swings on its own, without any deliberate push. In a similar way, laughter can erupt suddenly, without any reason. Neurons connecting emotions and movements may misfire, sending signals to the muscles controlling the face and voice. This creates laughter even when there is no joke or funny event. The brain cannot always stop these signals, which is why the laughter feels sudden and uncontrolled. Modern neuroscience has studied this phenomenon. In 2008, a team led by neurologist Antonio Damasio found that random laughter can be linked to abnormal activity in the brain's limbic system. Other studies, including work from the University of Oxford in 2015, show that the cerebellum, usually responsible for movement, can also send unexpected signals that make us laugh. Coping strategies include pausing and focusing on your breathing, shifting attention to another task, or talking to a doctor if the laughter becomes frequent. Mindfulness exercises and regular sleep can also help reduce episodes. Random laughter glitches are usually harmless signals from the brain misfiring. Understanding this makes the experience less scary and more manageable. You wake up and try to focus on the day, but one small thought keeps circling in your mind. It repeats while you make breakfast and again while you tie your shoes. You try to push it away, but it plays like a short loop. Only later do you realize that this is a memory echo loop, a moment when a thought circle forms inside your mind and keeps running without control. You can imagine your brain as a set of sound booths. When a signal enters one booth, it should pass to the next and fade. Sometimes, the signal bounces between walls. In the brain, this bouncing happens in circuits that link the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, and the default mode network. These areas guide memory recall, attention, and self-related thinking. When the balance between these systems is off, the signal does not fade. Instead, it repeats. Neurons fire in patterns. If a pattern repeats, the synapses grow stronger. This can create a stable loop. Stress increases activity in the amygdala and reduces control from the prefrontal cortex. This makes the loop stronger. Fatigue and sensory overload also reduce the brain's ability to shift tasks, which can let the loop keep spinning. A well-known study by Daniel Wegner in 1994 showed that trying to suppress a thought can make it come back more often. Later brain imaging research in the early 2000s from teams at Harvard University and University of Oxford found increased activity in the default mode network during repeated intrusive thoughts. These studies helped explain why memory echoes feel automatic and sticky. Some Eastern traditions saw them as signs of unsettled attention. These loops may appear during anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, or high stress. They can also show up in healthy people after strong emotional events. When a memory loop forms, awareness narrows. The brain gives fewer resources to new sights and sounds. This can make the world feel distant, while the inner echo becomes louder. You walk into your kitchen and suddenly smell freshly baked cookies. You follow your nose, but there are no cookies anywhere. This strange experience is called a phantom smell, or phantasmia, when you perceive an odor that is not really present. Think of your nose and brain like a radio and a speaker. Normally, the radio sends clear signals, and the speaker plays them as sounds or smells. Sometimes, the radio sends signals that do not match any real music. In phantasmia, the brain receives signals that create smells that are not in the environment. Phantom smells often happen when the olfactory system, which detects odors, is triggered incorrectly. Causes include sinus infections, allergies, head injuries, certain medications, or even stress. Strong smells, bright lights, or fatigue can sometimes set off these phantom odors. Doctors have noticed phantom smells for centuries. In the 1800s, French physician Jean-Martin Charcot recorded patients who complained of burning or foul odors without any source. Early scientists thought these smells were purely imaginary or linked to hysteria. Modern neuroscience shows that phantasmia comes from brain activity in the olfactory cortex and related areas. A 2004 study by Richard Doty at the University of Pennsylvania found that nerve damage or misfiring in the olfactory bulb can create strong false odor sensations. Functional MRI scans show that the brain areas responsible for smell light up even without real odor molecules. This explains why phantom smells feel real and can trigger emotional responses. Different cultures have interpreted phantom smells in various ways. Some considered them omens or messages from spirits, while philosophers debated whether these smells exist in the mind or the world. Studying phantom smells helps scientists understand the olfactory system better. By seeing how the brain interprets signals, researchers learn how smell connects to memory, emotion, and perception. Phantom smells reveal that smelling is not just about molecules in the air, but also about how the brain interprets those signals. At a desk, while reading an important email, the words can blur and jump on the screen. No matter how hard attention is focused, the details may slip past. This temporary state, called blurred focus, occurs when the brain cannot concentrate on small details. Blurred focus is different from simple tiredness or distraction. Being tired may make you slow, but you can still notice details if you push yourself. Distraction occurs when something pulls your attention away. Blurred focus, however, makes the details themselves hard to register, even in a quiet environment. Picture your mind as a camera lens. Sometimes the lens is perfect and sharp. Other times, it becomes smeared or foggy, and the image loses clarity. Physiologically, blurred focus involves the autonomic nervous system. When the body experiences stress or sudden excitement, the sympathetic system releases adrenaline. This hormone speeds up the heart and sharpens general alertness, but reduces attention to fine details. At the same time, changes in blood flow to the eyes and brain can make vision and focus temporarily uneven. Hormonal factors also play a role. Fluctuations in cortisol, the stress hormone, or thyroid hormones can affect concentration. Even small changes in internal chemistry can make the difference between clear and blurred perception. Different cultures interpret blurred focus in unique ways. Some view it as a signal to rest, while others see it as a sign of mental strain or spiritual imbalance. Modern science has studied these effects. In 2011, Dr. Michael Posner's research showed that the prefrontal cortex, responsible for detailed attention, slows when stress hormones rise. Similar studies confirm that temporary blurred focus is a common biological response to pressure or fatigue. Blurred focus affects perception by making tasks seem harder and time slower. It also changes experience, making ordinary details fade and forcing the mind to prioritize what seems most important. Walking to school with a warm cup of tea, the hand can move the wrong way for a moment, causing the cup to tilt. Nothing serious occurs, yet the small slip can feel surprising. Later, it may be recognized as a cognitive hiccup, a brief lapse in judgment that the mind often corrects before any real trouble begins. A cognitive hiccup shows up as a quick error, slowed reaction, or a misplaced action. It is usually harmless. It often comes from mild distraction, tiredness, or sudden overload. The key trait is that it is brief. Your thinking returns to normal as soon as the moment passes. Think of it like a wobbling bicycle. The bike does not fall, but it shakes because the balance system misfires for a second. In the brain, the same kind of wobble can appear when attention and working memory do not line up. Networks in the prefrontal cortex help you plan and control choices. When they compete with signals from older regions like the limbic system, tiny mistakes appear. The brain is always managing too much information. When it tries to update, shift focus, or slow an impulse, a short delay can create a small gap between what you mean to do and what you actually do. Research also shows how such slips happen during conflict tasks. The classic 1935 color word experiment by John Ridley Stroop found that people often pause or stumble when reading a color word printed in a different color. This study made clear that competing mental processes can interrupt smooth action. Cognitive hiccups appear when people are multitasking, stressed, rushed, or mildly tired. They also occur during sudden emotional shifts. The main idea is simple. Small mental slips happen to everyone, and they are normal signs of a busy mind trying to keep up. You walk past a bakery on a normal afternoon. A sweet warm smell rises in the air, and suddenly your eyes fill with tears. You are back in your grandmother's kitchen, even though you did not plan to think about her at all. Only later do you realize what happened. This is sudden nostalgia, an emotion that rises quickly when a small cue wakes up an old memory. Types of sudden nostalgia include smell-based memories, sound-based memories, and place-based memories. Imagine the brain as a huge library where some books slide out on their own when a small vibration shakes the shelf. A smell, sound, or color can act like that vibration. The signal first enters the sensory areas. Then it moves toward the hippocampus, which stores long-term memory. If the cue matches an old pattern, the memory becomes active. The amygdala then adds emotion, raising your heart rate or making your throat tight. Because these parts work closely together, the reaction feels fast and strong. The prefrontal cortex tries to add logic, but it usually comes a little late, which is why the feeling can surprise you. A well-known study by Rachel Herz in 2004 showed that smell-related memories create stronger emotional responses than memories that come from pictures or words. This helped explain why small sensory cues can create sudden emotional floods. Many people report this experience at least a few times each year across different ages. Mood, stress, personality, and past experiences all shape how strong the memory feels. People who reflect often or who feel lonely may notice the effect more. Groups can feel sudden nostalgia when hearing old songs or seeing cultural symbols. These cues link personal memories with shared history. Sudden nostalgia shows how tightly memory and emotion are joined inside the brain. While sitting, perhaps scrolling on a phone, a sudden feeling can arise that something bad is about to happen. There is no clear reason, and after a short while, the sensation fades. This experience is known as a random anxiety spike. The brain can resemble a smoke detector in a house, usually quiet and alert only when there is real danger. Sometimes, it goes off without a real threat, sending a false alarm. This occurs during a random anxiety spike. Neuroscientists explain that the amygdala, which processes fear, can trigger stress hormones like adrenaline, causing the heart to beat faster and the body to feel tense. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which normally helps with clear thinking and calm, may lag behind, resulting in a sudden burst of fear. Research supports this. A 2011 study by Krask and colleagues found that unpredictable stressors can trigger sudden anxiety even without an obvious threat. The brain reacts as if danger is near, even when the environment is safe. Random anxiety spikes are different from panic attacks, which are longer and more intense, and from general anxiety, which is persistent over time. These sudden feelings affect many people. Surveys suggest nearly 20% of adults experience brief, intense anxiety at least once in their life. I know this firsthand because I've experienced random anxiety spikes myself many times, and I still feel them now. When that feeling hits, anxiety starts building up inside me, and all of a sudden, I just sink into it. It's a very annoying feeling that I have been experiencing for a long time. In literature and media, these moments appear often. Characters may feel unexplained fear before events, creating tension and realism. Socially, understanding them helps reduce stigma, showing that brief fear is a normal brain response, not a personal flaw. Cognitively, experiencing these spikes can teach the brain to recognize false alarms. With awareness, people can use simple strategies like deep breathing or grounding exercises to calm the body and regain control, even when the dread comes without warning. In a supermarket filled with hundreds of snack options, chips, cookies, candy, and drinks in every shape and flavor, the mind can feel stuck. Decision-making seems frozen, and no choice comes easily. This experience, known in psychology as cognitive overfill, occurs when the brain receives too much information at once and struggles to process it. The brain can act like a busy airport, with flights taking off and landing constantly. When too many flights arrive at the same time, delays and confusion occur. Similarly, cognitive overfill happens when the brain's processing limits are reached. Neurons send signals continuously, but when overloaded, connections become noisy, attention falters, and decision-making slows. The prefrontal cortex, which handles planning and choices, struggles to sort relevant from irrelevant information. Meanwhile, the amygdala may increase stress or anxiety, making clear thinking even harder. Historically, people noticed this effect without naming it. Ancient traders described feeling stuck when choosing between many goods in busy markets. Even in modern life, students report freezing when presented with too many tasks or instructions at once. Research confirms these experiences. Psychologist Sheena Iyengar in 2000 studied shoppers choosing jams. People given 24 options were less likely to buy than those with 6 options. The brain works better with limited, clear information. Cognitive overfill affects attention and perception. The brain narrows focus when overloaded, filtering some details but missing others. Working memory becomes taxed, making it hard to compare choices or plan ahead. Understanding cognitive overfill helps in daily life. Limiting choices, organizing information, or taking breaks can prevent freezing. In education, work, and shopping, giving fewer clear options improves decisions. Evolutionarily, This mechanism protected humans from paralysis in complex, unfamiliar environments, allowing faster action when needed. Cognitive overfill shows that too much information can stop thinking, even in simple everyday situations, and knowing how to manage it makes life smoother. You are trying to solve a math problem for a long time. You write different numbers, check your steps, and nothing works. Then suddenly, while making tea, the answer pops into your mind. You had been thinking hard, but the solution came from somewhere unexpected. This sudden moment is called a sudden insight glitch. Think of your brain like a busy kitchen. Different cooks handle different tasks. Sometimes one cook is stuck on a recipe and cannot finish. Another cook, who is not paying attention to that dish, suddenly adds the right spice. In the brain, different networks work together. The default mode network, which is active during rest and mind wandering, often produces unexpected ideas. Meanwhile, the executive control network, which focuses on tasks, may not see the solution at first. The glitch happens when a solution jumps from the resting network into the focus network, appearing out of nowhere. In modern Japan, the term satori describes a sudden understanding during meditation. People often see these moments as signs of luck or special talent. Research supports the idea of sudden insights. In 2004, a study by Kunios and Beeman used brain scans to see what happens before people solve puzzles suddenly. They found that brain activity in the right temporal lobe increases just before a sudden solution. This shows that the brain prepares for insight even if the person does not notice it. Other studies, like those by Jung Beeman in 2004, confirm that taking breaks or relaxing can trigger these solutions. Sudden insight glitches feel surprising and sometimes magical. They remind us that the brain works in hidden ways. Personally, these moments show that stepping away from a problem can help more than pushing harder. Solutions can arrive when you least expect them. On a stationary train at the station, a sensation of moving forward can suddenly appear, even though the train has not started. This curious experience is called imagined motion. The brain can act like a projector, playing movement as if it were a film. When imagining motion, areas that control movement, including the motor cortex, can activate even without actual movement. These signals create a sensation of moving. The brain combines information from vision, balance, and body position. If there is a mismatch, such as seeing motion from a passing train while the body remains still, the brain can trick the mind into feeling movement. This is why imagined motion can feel real. Research shows that imagined motion activates similar brain regions as real movement. A well-known study by Desity and colleagues in 1994 found that when people imagined walking or running, their motor cortex showed activity similar to actual movement. Functional MRI studies also support this finding, showing that visualizing motion engages the same neural networks used in performing movements. Neuroscientists explain that the brain cannot always tell the difference between imagined and real movement, creating the illusion of motion. In some cultures, athletes and dancers practice moves in their head first. Thinking about the movements helps them perform better. Understanding imagined motion helps in therapy, sports training, and virtual reality design. Athletes practice movements mentally to improve performance. Patients recovering from injury use imagined motion to retrain muscles. Even in daily life, being aware of these sensations can reduce dizziness or discomfort in moving vehicles. At a birthday party, a friend might be seen and momentarily called by the wrong name. The friend looks confused, and the mind quickly corrects itself. This common mix-up of names and faces is called a name-face swap. Name-face swap happens when you accidentally say one person's name while thinking of another. You might confuse friends, family members, or classmates who look or act alike. It is different from forgetting a name entirely because you still remember names, just in the wrong combination. People often notice it more when they are tired, stressed, or in a hurry. Your brain is like a big school locker. Each locker holds a student's belongings, just like each face and name is stored in your memory. Sometimes, two lockers look very similar or are next to each other. When you try to grab something, you might open the wrong locker by mistake. In the same way, your brain sees a face and tries to pull the correct name, but if the memories are close or you are distracted, it can pick the wrong one. Memory, attention, and language all work together in this process. Name, face swaps are common. Most people experience them at some point in life. They are more frequent among adults who know many people or who are under stress. Children can have them too, especially when learning new names. Culturally, confusing names is often seen as funny. In history, writers and storytellers have used mistaken names as a source of humor or plot twists. Some cultures even have specific sayings about mixing up relatives' names. The risks are usually low, though repeated mix-ups might cause social awkwardness or mild embarrassment. In work or school, it can affect communication if people are sensitive about being called the wrong name. The key insight is that name, face swaps are a natural part of how the brain organizes information. They show that memory and recognition are connected but not perfect. You are typing a message to a friend and suddenly your fingers press the wrong keys even though you know the words by heart. You meant to write happy birthday, but your hands typed something else. This is called a muscle memory miscue. A muscle memory miscue happens when your body performs an action automatically but incorrectly. It often feels like your hands, feet, or even voice have a mind of their own. You might trip on a familiar path, miss a step in a dance routine, or say the wrong word in a sentence you have said many times. The brain can work like a well-organized workshop, where repeated actions are stored as routines. When an action is performed often, it is recorded in areas such as the motor cortex and the cerebellum, allowing movements without conscious thought. Sometimes, the brain selects the wrong routine or mixes up steps. For instance, fingers may follow old patterns when typing fast, even if the words have changed. This mix-up resembles reaching for a familiar tool in the workshop that is not needed for the current task. Fatigue, stress, distractions, or rushing can increase the chances of a miscue. Changes in environment or equipment, like a new keyboard, can also cause the body to revert to older, automatic patterns. Artists, musicians, and athletes have long observed these mistakes. In traditional Japanese tea ceremonies, practitioners sometimes spill tea despite years of training. Ancient martial arts texts mention accidental strikes caused by overlearned movements. Research by Shadmer and Holcomb in 1997 shows that repeated practice strengthens neural circuits, making them automatic. Yet these circuits can misfire if conditions change. Studies on typing errors and piano slips confirm that muscle memory can cause mistakes even in experts. Muscle memory miscues remind us that even automatic skills need attention. Awareness and slow practice help correct them. Spatial misjudgment is when a person incorrectly estimates the distance, height, or size of an object. It is a common type of perceptual error that affects everyday activities. Imagine standing at the edge of a small pond and thinking you can jump across safely. You take a leap but land in the water because the distance was greater than it appeared. This experience shows how spatial misjudgment can lead to surprise or minor accidents. People often notice this error when driving, walking in crowded areas, or playing sports. Spatial misjudgment is like trying to measure a room using only your eyes instead of a tape measure. The brain uses visual cues such as size, texture, and perspective to estimate distance and height. When these cues are unclear or misleading, the brain can make mistakes. Factors such as lighting, background patterns, and experience influence perception. Depth perception, controlled by the eyes and brain, is key to accurate judgment. If one eye is weaker, or if the brain receives conflicting information, the estimation can fail. Studies also show that stress or fatigue can reduce accuracy because the brain processes visual information more slowly. Early studies of visual perception by researchers in the 19th century showed that people often overestimate or underestimate distances in unfamiliar settings. Psychologists have long studied these errors to understand how humans interact with their environment. Being aware of spatial misjudgment can prevent accidents. Drivers, athletes, and workers at heights must pay extra attention to distances. Using tools like measuring tapes or markers can improve safety in daily life. Spatial misjudgment highlights how the brain and eyes work as a system. Small changes in one part, such as vision or attention, can affect the overall judgment. Understanding this can help in designing safer spaces and training people to improve their perception. Imagine you are watching your favorite show. You think only 10 minutes have passed, but when you check the clock, an hour has gone by. You were certain about the time, but your sense of it was wrong. This is called temporal misjudgment. The mind can resemble a train, sometimes moving fast and sometimes slow, depending on activity. When bored, time can seem to drag, while during busy or exciting moments, it can appear to fly. This occurs because the brain tracks time using attention and memory. Focusing on many details can make time feel longer, whereas distraction can make it feel shorter. Emotions and tasks influence the pace of the internal clock. Research supports this idea. In 1997, Sakai and Block confirmed that attention affects time perception. Experiment shows that time judgments are not fixed but flexible, depending on mental state and task type. Brain areas like the basal ganglia and cerebellum help track time. Dopamine, a chemical in the brain, also changes how we perceive time. High dopamine can make time seem faster. Damage to certain brain regions can make people lose track of hours and minutes, or vice versa. Different cultures have different views of time. Ancient Greeks saw time as a flowing river. Some modern societies focus on exact hours, while others are more flexible, showing how culture can shape temporal misjudgment. Temporal misjudgment happens in sports, work, or learning. People underestimate time when playing games or overestimate during boring tasks. Temporal misjudgment shows that our sense of time is not perfect. It is shaped by attention, emotion, and culture, reminding us that feeling of time is personal and flexible. In a classroom, a sharp taste of lemon can suddenly appear on the tongue. No one nearby is eating, yet the flavor feels real. This sensation, arising from nowhere, is known as a phantom taste. Phantom tastes often appear without warning. People report sweet, salty, sour, bitter, or metallic flavors even when they have not eaten. The taste may stay for seconds or last for hours. Some people feel the taste in only part of the tongue, while others sense it across the whole mouth. Many describe it as distracting or annoying, especially when it repeats. Phantom tastes can also mix with normal tastes and confuse what a person is actually eating. Imagine a home alarm that goes off even when no one has opened the door. The alarm is working, but it is reacting to the wrong signal. Phantom taste works in a similar way. Taste cells on the tongue send signals to the brain through nerves. These signals usually match real food. When something changes in the mouth, nerves, or brain, the system can fire without a real trigger. Damaged taste cells may send random messages. Nerves may misfire after infection or injury. The brain may fill in missing information when its usual taste input is weak. Smell can also influence taste, so problems in the nose may confuse the taste system. All these pathways interact, and when one part sends the wrong message, the whole system produces a taste that is not actually there. Phantom taste appears in people of many ages, but is more common in older adults. It can follow mouth infections, colds, dental work, nerve injury, or certain medicines. Dry mouth and smoking can raise the chance as well. In the past, some cultures linked mysterious tastes to spiritual signs. Others believed they were warnings from the body. Traditional healers often connected unusual tastes to imbalances in diet or energy. Phantom taste shows how closely body systems work together. Taste, smell, nerves, and brain activity blend to form one experience. When the boundaries between these systems shift, even slightly, the mind can create a taste that feels real although nothing is there. While cleaning an old closet, a childhood notebook can be discovered. Opening it can bring back a school trip in vivid detail. The games played, the jokes told by friends, and the excitement felt years ago return suddenly, as if the memory had never faded. This is called memory echo. Memory echoes often appear unexpectedly. They can be vivid and detailed or partial and unclear. The memory may be triggered by a smell, sound, or visual cue, or it may appear spontaneously without any clear reason. People often experience an emotional reaction, such as happiness, nostalgia, or sadness, when these memories return. The brain is like a vast library. Each memory is a book on a shelf. Sometimes, a specific smell, sound, or sight works like a librarian, pulling a book from the shelf even after many years. Memory echoes occur because the hippocampus stores detailed information and links it to emotions in the amygdala. During sleep and rest, neural connections strengthen, allowing old memories to resurface. Studies in cognitive psychology show that memory is not a perfect recording, but a reconstructive process. Memories can be reactivated by cues and internal thoughts, causing them to appear suddenly. Memory echoes are common in healthy individuals, and sometimes in neurological conditions. A study by Rubin, Schroff, and Greenberg in 2003 found that 85% of adults reported experiencing sudden vivid memories from childhood. These experiences are linked to strong emotional or meaningful events. In ancient Greek tradition, philosophers like Plato in 380 BCE discussed the idea of recollection, believing that learning is a process of remembering past knowledge. Memory echoes connect modern science to these early ideas about the mind. Memory echoes influence how people perceive time and experience life. They can provide insight into personal history, strengthen identity, and sometimes trigger reflection or emotional healing. These moments show that memory is active, not just a record of the past. You are talking to your friend in English, and you want to explain why you are late. You start speaking and suddenly you say, "I was running so fast, Pero still got late." Here you mixed English with Spanish without planning it. This automatic mixing is what we call language blending. Language blending often appears in bilingual or multilingual environments. People may switch smaller units, like single words, or larger parts, like full phrases. It can happen when someone talks to others who share the same languages. It can also occur when a person cannot recall a word quickly, so the mind picks a word from another language. Tone, rhythm, and grammar may shift during the blend. Children in multilingual homes show more mixing because they learn languages side by side. Adults may blend more when tired or stressed. The brain can be compared to a smartphone with multiple apps open, where each language acts as an app. Most of the time, one app is used, but occasionally another pops up unexpectedly. Research shows that both languages remain active in the brain, even when a person tries to use only one. Brain imaging studies reveal increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, which helps with control and selection. Extra effort is required to choose the correct word and suppress the other language. Studies on bilinguals show that this constant practice improves switching skills in general tasks. Memory networks store similar ideas across languages, making blended speech a natural result of shared pathways. Language mixing, therefore, is not a mistake but a normal part of bilingual processing. A well-known example of language blending in history comes from the period after the Norman conquest. From the 11th century onward, English speakers mixed Old English with Norman French. This blending shaped many modern English words and created long-lasting changes in daily speech. Language blending can help communication in mixed communities. It can also create shared group identity. Sometimes it causes confusion for listeners who know only one language. In learning settings, blending can show progress rather than error. Language blending is a normal, healthy sign of an active multilingual mind. Internal rhyme echo happens when a random word or rhyme suddenly pops into your mind without you trying to think of it. You might be walking to school and suddenly think of a word like cat, and then it rhymes with hat or bat in your head. One famous study by psychologist John F. Killstrom in 1987 explored spontaneous rhymes. He asked 200 participants to note any words that suddenly came to mind during the day. About 65% reported random rhymes popping up in their thoughts at least once a week. This study suggests that this phenomenon is common across age groups and not limited to poets or creative writers. Your brain is like a music playlist. Songs sometimes shuffle, and a familiar tune plays unexpectedly. Similarly, your brain stores words and sounds, and random connections trigger rhymes. Neuroscientists believe that the language areas in the left hemisphere and auditory processing areas work together. Random activation of these networks causes sudden rhymes to appear in consciousness. The process is automatic and does not require focused attention, showing that internal rhyme echoes are a normal part of how the brain handles words and sounds. Ancient Sanskrit texts from India around 500 BC mention poets experiencing sudden word pairings during meditation. The classical Greek poet Homer, around 800 BCE, was also said to notice spontaneous rhymes while composing orally. These early accounts suggest that this mental phenomenon has been observed for thousands of years. Internal rhyme echoes can help in creative writing, poetry, and music. They show how our brains make connections between sounds and meanings, which can improve memory and language learning. Internal rhyme echoes reveal the brain's natural ability to link words and sounds spontaneously, supporting creativity and cognitive flexibility. Trying to solve a tricky math problem while listening to music and checking your phone messages at the same time. Suddenly, you forget what you were doing. This moment shows what we call cognitive overload hiccup, a temporary inability to process multiple inputs. The brain can resemble a busy kitchen during a dinner rush, where each dish represents a different task requiring attention. When too many orders arrive at once, the chefs struggle and mistakes or delays occur. Similarly, a cognitive overload hiccup happens when the brain receives more information than it can process. The working memory, which holds information temporarily, reaches its limit. In such moments, the brain struggles to switch between tasks, leading to confusion, short-term forgetfulness, or brief pauses in thinking. A popular study by Sweller in 1988 on cognitive load theory showed that when students were given too many instructions at once, 70% of them made errors or could not complete the task. This study confirms that the brain has a limited capacity to handle information simultaneously and can experience temporary hiccups under overload. Cognitive overload involves the prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and attention control. Excessive input causes high activity in this area and overloads neural circuits. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and glutamate are affected, reducing the efficiency of signal transmission. This leads to slower reaction time and temporary lapses in memory or focus. In 17th century Europe, scholars observed that students overwhelmed with reading multiple texts often forgot key points. This was recorded in the notebooks of John Locke in 1689, who emphasized focused study over multitasking. Cognitive overload is common in classrooms, workplaces, or even when using multiple digital devices. It also appears during stressful situations or rapid information change. The brain works best with manageable input, and temporary pauses in thinking signal the need to reduce information load. A familiar room can suddenly feel strange. Details previously unnoticed stand out, and the space seems subtly altered. This experience of sudden unfamiliarity, even in a well-known place, is called familiarity shock. To understand why this happens, think of your brain as a GPS. When you visit a familiar place, your brain easily maps out your surroundings, making the experience feel automatic. However, when something in your environment changes slightly, like the furniture being moved or a new object being placed in the room, your brain struggles to recognize the new arrangement. It's like the GPS trying to guide you on a route it hasn't memorized. This disruption causes your brain to process the place in a way it would a new environment. This phenomenon may involve the brain's hippocampus, the part responsible for memory and spatial navigation. The sudden confusion occurs when your brain tries to reconcile the new details with old memories, creating a moment of surprise. This experience is different from déjà vu, where a person feels they've lived through an event before. Familiarity shock happens when a familiar space suddenly feels new, rather than when a situation feels strangely familiar. Familiarity shock is more likely to occur when there is a change in the environment or when we are particularly stressed or tired. It is also common during life transitions, like moving to a new home or returning after a long time away. In a study conducted by Dr. Daniel Shatter in 1996, it was found that disruptions in our memory processes, such as those that happen during a change in environment, can lead to feelings of unfamiliarity, even in familiar places. Shatter's research on memory and brain function helped explain how small alterations can shift our perception of the world around us. Familiarity shock is a reminder that our brains are always adapting, and that small changes in our environment can shake up our sense of certainty. You are baking a cake. First, you mix the ingredients, then you pour the batter into a pan, and finally, you bake it in the oven. If you were to skip the mixing step and pour dry ingredients directly into the oven, the result would be an incomplete cake. This is a simple analogy for sequential slip. Performing actions in an incorrect order leads to unexpected or incomplete results. In logical terms, a sequential slip can be seen as a disruption in the flow of a process, whether it's reasoning, problem solving, or even tasks like making coffee. If you put the coffee grounds into the cup before the water, it won't lead to the desired outcome, just like reasoning without proper steps leads to confusion or errors. In 2000, psychologist Daniel Kahneman conducted research on cognitive biases and errors in decision-making, highlighting how people often skip important steps unconsciously, leading to faulty judgments. This research showed how sequential slip can affect everyday decisions, from choosing a product to making complex professional choices. Psychologically, sequential slip happens due to the brain's natural tendency to automate processes, making us prone to skipping steps or doing them out of order. This is a result of cognitive shortcuts or heuristics, where the brain simplifies tasks to save energy, sometimes causing errors in the sequence. The order of steps is crucial for achieving success, whether it's a task as simple as making a sandwich or as complex as problem solving at work. The misplaced object illusion occurs when you expect to find an object in a particular place, but it isn't there. You search for it in the usual spot, only to realize it has been moved or placed elsewhere. Imagine walking into a room, and you expect to see your keys on the kitchen counter. When they're not there, your brain goes through a process of confusion. The brain has developed a system where it remembers common locations for items, especially in familiar environments. This is a survival mechanism. Knowing where important things are, like food or tools, helps us act quickly and efficiently. However, sometimes our brains rely too much on patterns, and we experience this illusion. When our brain expects to see something in a familiar place, it can fill in the gap with the image of the object. For example, if you always place your phone on the dining table, your brain may believe it's still there even when it's not. The visual system tricks the brain into thinking the object is in the usual spot. This happens because of how our memory works, combining past experiences with current perception. One of the earliest studies in this area was conducted by famous psychologist Ulrich Neisser in 1976. Neisser's research on cognitive psychology revealed how our mind uses schemas, mental maps of familiar situations, help us anticipate and recognize objects in our environment. This work showed how familiar locations can lead to confusion when an object is moved. This illusion shows how our brain constructs reality. It highlights how our memories and expectations shape what we perceive, influencing everything from simple object searches to complex decision-making processes. Imagined sound is when a person hears a sound that is not actually present in the environment. This can include hearing voices, music, or other noises that seem real but have no source. The idea of hearing sounds that are not there has been around for centuries, but it was first scientifically studied in the 19th century. The term auditory hallucination began to be used by psychologists in the late 1800s to describe these experiences. Over time, the study of this phenomenon grew, especially as people began to understand more about how the brain works and processes sounds. The study of imagined sound became part of the larger field of psychiatry and psychology. The brain can act like a busy train station, with thoughts, memories, and emotions arriving and leaving constantly. Sometimes, it produces a train that does not actually exist. In a similar way, sounds can be heard that are not really there. For example, a person might hear their name being called when no one is around. This occurs because the brain mixes memories, emotions, or stress, leading to imagined sounds as sensory information is misprocessed. Factors like stress, fatigue, or certain illnesses can increase the chances of hearing imagined sounds. Strong emotions, such as fear or anxiety, can also trick the brain into thinking it hears things that aren't there. The meaning behind imagined sounds can differ based on the person's culture, beliefs, and personal experiences. For some, hearing a voice might be a sign of a higher power or spiritual connection, while for others, it might suggest mental distress. The way people interpret these sounds can deeply affect how they react to them. Memory skip refers to the phenomenon where small, often insignificant details are missing or forgotten when recalling an event or experience. Imagine trying to recall a movie you watched a year ago. You remember the main plot, the characters, and a few exciting moments, but small details, like the color of the main character's shirt or a minor scene, are lost. This is memory skip. The brain is like a filing cabinet where we store information. However, unlike an organized filing system, our memories are not perfectly cataloged. When we try to recall an event, we may retrieve the key details, but minor information is often skipped or overlooked because our brain prioritizes the bigger picture over smaller details. This happens because memory retrieval isn't a perfect process. It involves reconstruction. Our brain fills in gaps based on what we believe or expect, and the details we don't consider important get left behind. For example, when remembering a family gathering, you might remember the food and who was present but forget who sat next to you or the exact color of the curtains. This kind of memory skip is natural and part of how we process vast amounts of information. One famous study by Elizabeth Loftus in 1974 explored how memory can be manipulated, showing that people could recall incorrect details depending on how questions were framed. This study, often cited as the misinformation effect, illustrates how details can be skipped or altered in memory based on outside influences. Loftus' findings suggest that memory is not always a reliable record but rather an evolving process where minor details may be altered or lost. Memory skip can be adaptive. By focusing on key information, our brain avoids being overwhelmed with unimportant details, allowing us to function more effectively in daily life. It helps us prioritize important information, making our cognitive load manageable. In many cultures, storytelling traditions have evolved around the idea of preserving essential memories, while minor details are often left out. In the 19th century, oral storytelling was popular in many societies. The story would focus on significant events, and minor aspects would often be forgotten or altered. This way, the essence of the story was preserved, reflecting the importance of memory skip in cultural transmission. Memory skip highlights how the brain filters out less important details, focusing on the bigger picture. This is a natural and adaptive process, though it can sometimes affect the accuracy of our recollections. Cognitive doubletake is when you see or hear something that seems familiar, but for a moment you second-guess it. It's like thinking you know something well, only to realize there's more to it than you thought. Imagine walking into a room and seeing a familiar object, like a cup, but for a second, it seems odd to you. Your brain initially processes it as just another cup, but then something triggers a second look. The first glance is handled by a part of the brain that deals with quick judgments, like the prefrontal cortex. However, when something doesn't match expectations, a second review is needed. This is where the hippocampus steps in. It is responsible for memory and learning, so when we double-take, the hippocampus reassesses the object in more detail. For instance, if you see an object that looks like a cup but is actually a sculpture, you'll have to process it differently. The brain's need to recheck helps correct any mistake in judgment. A key study by Kahneman and Tversky in 1974 explored how our brains make snap judgments, and sometimes revisit them. Their research on cognitive biases helped explain why humans might have a double-take moment, reconsidering something that seemed clear at first. The idea of revisiting and reconsidering things isn't new. For centuries, artists and philosophers have spoken about how perception is not always accurate. For example, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato in his writings around 380 BCE discussed how human perception can be deceived, prompting a deeper understanding of what we see. This reprocessing shows that meaning is not always instantaneous. Understanding requires more than just recognizing something at face value. The cognitive doubletake reminds us that our brains are constantly refining what we know, encouraging deeper thinking and learning. Mouth. Brain lag occurs when the brain plans words correctly, but the mouth speaks them incorrectly, especially during fast speech. The term comes from studies in speech production in the 20th century. Linguists and psychologists noticed that people often mix up sounds or syllables when speaking quickly. Researchers like Norman and Shattuck in the 1960s examined these errors to understand the timing between thinking and speaking. The phrase itself was created to describe the slight delay between the brain's plan for speech and the mouth's actual movement. Imagine the brain as a computer sending instructions to a robot mouth. When the computer sends commands too fast, the robot sometimes presses the wrong buttons. In humans, the brain must select words, arrange them in order, and send signals to the muscles for speech. If someone speaks too quickly, these steps can overlap, causing mistakes. For example, a person trying to say chocolate cake fast might say chocolate cake or chocolate cake. These are called slips of the tongue. Cognitive scientists say this happens because planning, memory, and motor execution compete for attention. Hearing and processing speed also affect mouth-brain lag. If a speaker hears their own voice slowly or unclearly, the brain may adjust words incorrectly. Fast talking increases chances of errors. Mouth-brain lag occurs in all languages and social settings. In informal conversation, slips may be funny, while in formal speech, they can cause embarrassment. Listeners often notice errors more than intended. A small slip can change meaning, like saying blue shoes instead of blue shoes, and affect communication. the brain of the listener tries to correct the mistake automatically. Reverse déjà vu is the feeling of knowing what will happen before it occurs. It is different from normal déjà vu because it is about anticipating future events rather than recalling past experiences. In 2003, a study by Dr. Ann Cleary at Colorado State University explored memory illusions in students. Participants were shown a series of images and later asked to predict which images would appear next. Some reported a strong sense of familiarity for images they had not yet seen. This study suggested that the brain sometimes forms a sense of future sequences based on patterns learned from past experiences. Other research, like the 2010 experiment by Drive Julia Sentner, showed that people with high visual memory ability could anticipate sequences more accurately than others. These experiments indicate that reverse déjà vu may arise when the brain detects patterns and prepares for likely events. Think of the brain as a video player that can fast forward based on clues. When we notice patterns, our mind can predict the next steps. For example, if someone always greets you in a certain order, you might feel certain they will follow the same sequence next. This feeling is reverse déjà vu. The brain uses memory, attention, and prediction skills to reconstruct possible outcomes before they happen. Reverse déjà vu may help people prepare for events by recognizing patterns quickly. It supports decision-making and problem-solving in daily life. Some cultures view reverse déjà vu as a sign of intuition or prophecy. Others see it as a trick of the mind. Socially, it can make people feel connected to events before they unfold. It often occurs during familiar routines or repeated situations. The brain reconstructs sequences by comparing past experiences with current cues. Reverse déjà vu is the brain predicting the future, showing how memory and attention guide our sense of time. Imagine you tell your friend about a movie line you really liked, but later they repeat it slightly differently, changing a few words. You both still understand the meaning, but the exact words are not the same. This is what happens with a misremembered quote, when a person recalls words incorrectly, changing the original meaning or phrasing. This concept comes from the study of human memory. People often repeat phrases they have heard, but over time, their brains can alter the words. It was first observed in literature and historical records when quotes were passed orally. Famous writers and speakers were often misquoted because memories of exact words faded. The origin of this term in psychology is linked to research on memory errors in the early 20th century, when scientists studied how people remember events and statements imperfectly. Think of memory like a copy of a painting. Every time you make a copy, small details can change. Our brains do not store exact words. Instead, we store ideas and feelings. When we recall a quote, the brain fills gaps with familiar words. For example, many people remember the line from Julius Caesar as "Et tu, Brute," but some recall it differently, like "You too, Brutus." This happens because the brain adapts words to fit what we expect or understand. Psychologists call this phenomenon reconstructive memory. It can also be influenced by suggestion, repetition, and personal beliefs. Misremembered quotes appear in everyday life, media, and education. One famous study by Elizabeth Loftus in 1975 showed how people could remember events that never happened, proving memory is not always reliable. These errors shape culture because widely repeated misquotes can seem more authentic than the original words. Memory is flexible and imperfect. Misremembered quotes show that human recall often changes words, not meaning. Memory stitching error happens when the brain mixes up parts of two separate events and remembers them as one. Our brain does not store memories like a video camera. It stores pieces of experiences, like sights, sounds, and feelings. Later, the brain combines these pieces when we try to remember. Sometimes, two events that are similar or close in time can get their pieces mixed. This creates a false memory that feels real. For example, if someone sees a car accident and then later hears a story about another accident, they might remember details from both as if they happened together. Stress, emotions, and the passage of time can make memory stitching errors more likely. When the brain fills gaps in memory, it uses imagination and previous knowledge. This can lead to memories that seem complete but are partly wrong. Scientists study this using experiments where participants recall events after being exposed to new, related information. Memory stitching errors are linked to the hippocampus, the brain area that handles memory formation. When errors occur, the hippocampus and related areas, like the prefrontal cortex, are active. Stress hormones, like cortisol, can make memory less accurate. People may feel confident about the memory even though it is partly false. Research on memory errors began in the 1970s. Psychologists discovered that people often confidently recall events that never happened or recall details incorrectly. Studies by Elizabeth Loftus showed that even small suggestions can change a person's memory. Her work changed how courts treat eyewitness testimony, because memory is not always reliable. Memory stitching errors show that human memory is flexible, but not always accurate. We should be careful about trusting memories completely. Brain echo is when a thought or idea keeps coming back in your mind without meaning to. It is like your brain is repeating something over and over, even if you do not want it to. For example, you might suddenly remember a line from a movie you watched last week, and it keeps playing in your mind all day, even when you are trying to focus on homework or talk with friends. Brain echo happens because of how our brain processes information. When we think of something, our brain makes connections between neurons. Sometimes these connections become very active, and the thought repeats. This can happen with both important thoughts and small, random ideas. The brain keeps recalling the same idea, even if we try to think about something else. It is like a song stuck in your head. The more we notice the thought, the more it stays. Memory, attention, and emotions all play a role. Stress or strong feelings can make the brain repeat a thought more. Many things can cause brain echo. Stress and anxiety are common triggers. When the brain is worried, it repeats thoughts to try to solve problems. Fatigue and lack of sleep make it harder to control these repeating thoughts. Sometimes the brain echo happens after hearing a phrase, reading something, or seeing a picture. Strong emotions like fear, excitement, or sadness can also make the thought repeat. Researchers have studied repetitive thoughts for many years. In the 1900s, psychologists like Sigmund Freud wrote about thoughts that return again and again. They noticed that some thoughts repeat naturally and are part of normal brain function. Today, scientists study brain activity to understand why these thoughts happen and how they sometimes appear in conditions like obsessive thinking. To reduce brain echo, people can distract themselves with another activity. Writing the thought down can help release it. Meditation and deep breathing calm the mind. Focusing on the present moment and doing physical activity can also reduce repeated thoughts. Brain echo is a normal part of how the mind works, but managing attention can help control it. Synaptic hesitation is the short pause or small delay that happens in the brain before we respond to a signal. It is the time between sensing something and acting on it. For example, when a ball suddenly rolls toward your foot while you are walking, you might feel a tiny pause before you lift your foot to stop it. That small pause is synaptic hesitation. When the brain receives information from the senses, the signal travels as an electrical impulse along nerve cells called neurons. At the end of each neuron is a tiny gap called a synapse. The signal cannot jump the gap directly. Instead, it triggers the release of chemicals called neurotransmitters. These chemicals cross the synapse and attach to the next neuron. This process takes a very small amount of time. The small delay we notice as hesitation happens because of this chemical transfer. The brain may also pause slightly to check the signal, compare it with memory, or plan the best response. Factors like fatigue, distractions, or complicated decisions can make the pause longer. Synaptic hesitation is normal and shows that the brain is carefully processing information before acting. Long ago, people thought hesitation meant weakness or doubt. In many cultures, quick reactions were seen as a sign of skill or courage. Philosophers sometimes described hesitation as careful thought or wisdom, showing that not all cultures valued speed over reflection. Understanding synaptic hesitation helps doctors study brain function. Conditions like Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis can increase hesitation. Athletes and drivers also need to understand it because faster responses improve safety and performance. Synaptic hesitation affects how we notice and react to our surroundings. It gives the brain time to process multiple signals and choose the best action. Awareness of hesitation can help people make better decisions and stay safe in complex situations. For example, a person who lost their arm might feel an itch on the missing hand and try to scratch it. This is called phantom itch, the sensation of an itch on a body part that no longer exists or can't feel touch, often after losing a limb or nerve damage. Phantom itch can happen when nerves or skin are injured. It may also appear after an arm or leg is amputated. Sometimes, changes in the brain or spinal cord can trigger the sensation. Stress, heat, or minor touch on other areas of the body may also make the itch stronger. Phantom itch was first noted by doctors like Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell during the American Civil War in the 1860s. He observed soldiers who had lost limbs scratching areas that no longer existed. This led early scientists to believe that the brain might be involved in creating these sensations. Later, other doctors in the 19th century began noticing phantom sensations in patients with nerve injuries or skin conditions. Modern research shows that phantom itch happens in the nervous system and the brain. Brain scans show that areas responsible for sensing touch and pain can become active even without real skin signals. Nerve endings can send mixed or false messages to the spinal cord. The spinal cord may amplify these messages. The brain can misinterpret signals and create a real feeling of itch. Studies also show that phantom itch is linked to the same brain circuits as real itches. Scientists can reduce it using drugs, physical therapy, and sometimes virtual reality that tricks the brain. Phantom itch shows that our senses are controlled by the brain. It helps us understand how the brain affects our feelings. Studying it helps doctors treat pain and other sensory issues better. Pattern misperception is when we think we see a pattern or structure in things, even though none really exists. For example, spotting shapes in the clouds or seeing faces in random objects, like rocks or wallpaper, is a type of pattern misperception. It is different from normal pattern recognition, where the brain uses clues to identify real patterns, like recognizing letters or numbers. Pattern misperception happens when our brain goes too far and finds patterns that aren't actually there. While some pattern recognition is necessary for learning and survival, misperception can lead to mistaken beliefs or thoughts, like seeing faces in shadows. The brain is wired to look for patterns to make sense of the world. This ability is connected to the brain's visual system and how it processes information. When we see random shapes, the brain automatically tries to make sense of them by searching for familiar forms. This can happen because the brain is constantly on alert for meaningful information, even if it has to create meaning where none exists. The brain's tendency to overinterpret is tied to the way it processes sensory information in regions like the occipital lobe. Sometimes, our hormones or emotions can increase the chances of pattern misperception. For example, when someone is anxious or scared, they may start seeing more patterns in their environment. This is because the brain is more focused on potential threats, making it easier to misinterpret harmless details as something significant. Cultural beliefs can significantly influence how we see patterns. In Western culture, one of the most common superstitions is the belief that a black cat crossing your path brings bad luck. This belief is widely known across Europe and North America, where people often associate a black cat with misfortune or even death. Though it is a random event, this superstition causes many people to misinterpret the appearance of a black cat as a sign of something negative happening in their lives. Scientists have studied pattern misperception to understand how our brains process information. A well-known 2015 study by Pawan Sinha at MIT explored how the brain's recognition system sometimes misinterprets random stimuli as meaningful patterns. His research showed that when presented with incomplete or noisy visual information, the brain often fills in the gaps, leading to the creation of patterns that do not actually exist. This phenomenon is tied to the brain's occipital lobe, responsible for visual processing. Pattern misperception can affect how we see the world around us. It can lead to confusion, false beliefs, or even influence our decisions. Recognizing this tendency can help us avoid making mistakes based on what we think we see, rather than what is really there. Perceptual shift is when an object's color or shape seems to change briefly, even though nothing has physically changed. It happens because of how our brain processes visual information. For example, imagine you're looking at a white piece of paper under bright light. Suddenly, the paper might appear slightly blue or yellow, even though the paper itself hasn't changed color. Once you look away and look back, the paper looks white again. This temporary change in how you see it is a perceptual shift. When we experience a perceptual shift, we might notice that colors appear lighter or darker, or shapes seem slightly stretched or squished. These changes happen in a brief moment, often without us realizing it. For example, a red object may suddenly appear orange, or a square might seem to morph into a rectangle, but once we refocus, the object looks normal again. These shifts usually last only a few seconds or minutes and are often very subtle. Perceptual shifts happen because of how our brain interprets visual signals. Our eyes send images to the brain, but the brain doesn't always interpret these signals perfectly. Factors like lighting, fatigue, or even emotions can influence how we perceive what we see. Sometimes, our brain relies on assumptions or past experiences, which can cause an object to appear differently. For example, if you are tired, your brain might misinterpret the color of a simple object, making it look darker than usual. Other times, these shifts can occur due to the way our brain handles motion, shadows, or surrounding colors. One of the most popular experiments related to perceptual shifts is Edward H. Adelson's checker shadow illusion 1995. In this famous study, Adelson demonstrated how our perception of color can be influenced by surrounding colors and shadows. He placed two squares of the same color on a checkerboard, but due to the surrounding shadows and colors, one square appeared much darker than the other, even though they were identical. This phenomenon, known as color contrast, shows how our brain adapts to its environment and can sometimes create temporary visual distortions. A popular cultural interpretation of perceptual shifts comes from the Renaissance period. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci used light, shadow, and color contrasts to create visual effects that changed how viewers perceive depth and shading. In works like the Mona Lisa, these techniques caused temporary perceptual shifts, influencing both the way art was viewed and the Renaissance understanding of beauty and the human experience. Perceptual shifts remind us that what we see isn't always the whole truth. Our brains are constantly interpreting and adjusting what we perceive. Sensory mismatch occurs when the sensation of touch does not match what we expect or anticipate. For example, when you touch a soft object but it feels hard, or when you expect something warm but it feels cold. Our brain relies on prior experiences and expectations to process sensory information. If something feels different from what we expected, it can cause confusion or discomfort. For example, if we touch a surface we believe is smooth, but it feels rough, our mind might feel unsettled. Emotions and mood can also play a role. If you're anxious or distracted, the sensation might not be processed as clearly. Sometimes, people with conditions like anxiety or trauma might experience stronger reactions to sensory mismatches. At the neurological level, sensory mismatch happens when the brain receives conflicting signals from different parts of the body. Our sensory system includes receptors in the skin that send information to the brain. When these signals don't match what we expect, the brain might struggle to make sense of them. The somatosensory cortex, which processes touch, compares incoming signals with previous experiences stored in memory. If there's a mismatch, it can lead to confusion or even a feeling of unease. This process is complex, involving not only the skin's receptors, but also higher brain functions like attention and perception. Our brain's ability to predict and adjust to sensory input is key. When predictions are off, it can lead to errors in perception, which is why a mismatch in touch feels so surprising. Throughout history, cultures have often interpreted sensory mismatches as signs or messages. In ancient Greece, unexpected touches or sensations, like a sudden chill, were believed to be omens from the gods, signaling divine intervention or important events. The Greeks viewed the body and senses as linked to the divine, so any mismatch between expectation and experience was seen as a sign of higher forces. Over time, these beliefs shaped how people understood and reacted to sensory experiences. Sensory mismatch shows how closely our mind and body are linked in understanding the world. When things feel different from what we expect, it can affect how we experience the world around us. An object permanence glitch happens when someone believes an object no longer exists after it is hidden or covered. The person acts as if the item has vanished, even though it is still there. For example, if a child's toy is covered by a blanket, the child may cry or search everywhere, thinking the toy is gone, even though it is right under the blanket. This glitch is most common in infants around 6 to 12 months. Some adults may experience it in unusual situations or due to brain injuries. It can affect learning, memory, and understanding of the environment. Object permanence relies on brain areas that track and store information about objects. The prefrontal cortex and parietal lobe help the brain remember objects even when out of sight. When a glitch occurs, these areas may not fully process the object's presence. Studies using brain scans show that infants and some patients with brain damage have lower activity in these regions. Research also suggests that attention and memory systems must work together for normal object permanence. Disruption in these networks can cause the mind to think the object has vanished. Stories for children often explore hiding and finding objects. Games like Peekaboo rely on the idea of object permanence. Understanding this glitch helps adults support children and explain why they act surprised when objects reappear. This glitch shows how the mind builds knowledge about the world. It highlights that perception is not only about seeing but also about memory and prediction. Learning object permanence is an important step in cognitive development. Cognitive overlap happens when our brain confuses similar events, objects, or experiences because they share characteristics. When two things look, sound, or feel alike, it can become hard to tell them apart. For example, you might mix up two of your friends who wear similar clothes or have similar hairstyles, even though they are different people. Cognitive overlap works through a process in our brain called pattern recognition. Our brain is always looking for patterns to make sense of the world. When something is similar to something we've experienced before, our brain might mix them up. Studies show that this confusion happens more when we are tired or distracted. Researchers also find that the more we experience similar situations, the harder it becomes to keep them separate in our minds. Cognitive overlap can affect many aspects of our lives. In school, It might cause students to confuse concepts or mix up facts from different subjects. In the workplace, it could lead to mistakes in remembering instructions or important details. The best way to reduce cognitive overlap is to pay close attention and give each experience or event the focus it needs. When learning, organizing information into categories can also help our brain make clearer distinctions. Throughout history, humans have often confused similar objects and ideas. For example, in ancient Egypt around 1500 BCE, people sometimes mixed up gods with similar appearances, like Ra and Horus, because both were depicted as falcons or had falcon heads. To avoid confusion, they used different symbols, colors, and stories to make each god unique. Similarly, in medieval Europe, people sometimes mixed up historical events and stories or chronicles because many battles and kings seemed alike. Over time, cultures developed clear symbols, written records, and paintings to help separate these similar ideas and preserve accurate memories. Cognitive overlap shows how important it is to stay focused and organized when learning or experiencing new things. By recognizing when things are similar, we can avoid mistakes and improve our memory. Memory intrusion happens when memories that are not relevant to the present moment suddenly appear in our minds. These memories can be random or seem out of place. They often pop up without warning and are not related to what we're doing or thinking at the time. For example, you might be in class listening to a teacher, and out of nowhere, a memory of a childhood pet might come to mind. Memory intrusion can occur due to various reasons. One major cause is the brain's process of organizing and storing information. Memories are often linked together, and sometimes when we remember one thing, an unrelated memory is triggered. Stress, lack of sleep, or distractions can also make these intrusive memories more likely. When the brain is overloaded or tired, it may mix up or bring up irrelevant memories. Research has shown that memory intrusions are common and can happen in both everyday situations and more serious conditions, like post-traumatic stress disorder. Studies suggest that intrusive memories may be linked to the brain's attempt to process emotions or events that have not been fully understood. This is why they can sometimes be upsetting or confusing. In medieval Europe, memory intrusions were often viewed through the lens of supernatural beliefs. People believed that unexpected memories or thoughts were signs of spiritual disturbances or unresolved issues from the past. During this period, there was a strong belief in the influence of spirits, ghosts, and divine forces on daily life. Today, scientists understand that memory intrusion is linked to how the brain processes, stores, and recalls memories. The brain's hippocampus plays a big role in this process. Memory intrusion can affect daily life. It may cause confusion, stress, or even disrupt concentration. Understanding how it works can help people manage and reduce these unexpected memory pops. Morning grogginess is the feeling of being confused, slow, or tired immediately after waking. People often describe it as a foggy state of mind where thinking clearly or remembering things is difficult. It usually lasts a few minutes to half an hour, but sometimes it can continue longer. Morning grogginess can happen to anyone, but it is more likely after poor sleep, waking up during deep sleep, or changing sleep schedules. It can also appear when someone is sick, stressed, or dehydrated. Even waking up at the right time can sometimes bring a brief feeling of confusion as the body shifts from sleep to full wakefulness. The brain works differently when a person is asleep. During deep sleep, certain areas of the brain that control attention, memory, and decision-making slow down. When someone wakes up suddenly from this stage, these areas are still inactive. This delay in brain activity causes temporary foggy thinking. Chemicals in the brain, like adenosine, which build up during sleep, may also contribute to grogginess. Some scientists call this state sleep inertia, meaning the brain needs time to fully switch from sleep mode to awake mode. Different cultures notice morning grogginess in different ways. In some societies, people accept it as normal and plan quiet activities after waking. In others, morning routines include coffee, tea, or light exercise to overcome this state quickly. Historical records show that people have always recognized the difficulty of thinking right after sleep. Morning grogginess can affect daily life by making it harder to focus, make decisions, or remember tasks. However, it is temporary and usually disappears as the brain wakes up fully. Functionally, it may protect the body from acting too quickly before it is ready. Understanding it can help people manage their mornings more effectively and start the day with clearer thinking. Dream intrusions happen when parts of a dream stay in your mind after you wake up, making you continue to think about or feel what you experienced in the dream. For example, if you dreamt of running through a forest, feeling scared and trapped, you might still feel anxious or keep thinking about the forest even after you wake up. This is a dream intrusion. Dream intrusions can vary in intensity and form. Some people may experience fleeting images or emotions that fade quickly upon waking, while others find that dream scenes or sensations linger for hours or even days. Intrusive dreams can also manifest as persistent thoughts or flashbacks related to the dream, affecting daily activities or decision-making. From a scientific point of view, dream intrusions happen because of how our brain handles memories. During sleep, especially in the rapid eye movement phase, the brain works to organize and store the experiences we had during the day. Sometimes, this process isn't perfect, and bits and pieces of dreams can stay with us after we wake up. Additionally, areas of the brain connected to emotions, like the amygdala, can stay active even after we're awake. This is why strong feelings from dreams, like fear or excitement, can continue to affect us during the day. To manage persistent dream intrusions, especially if they are upsetting, therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and imagery rehearsal therapy are often used. These approaches help individuals change the way they think about and react to the dreams. Techniques like mindfulness meditation and relaxation exercises can also be helpful. They work by teaching people how to stay calm and in control of their thoughts, which can reduce the emotional impact of dreams that keep lingering after waking. In ancient Greece, dream intrusions were viewed as important messages that could guide daily life. People believed that dreams which stayed in the mind after waking carried meaning from higher powers. Temples called healing temples were places where individuals slept in hopes of receiving dreams that could offer help or warnings. Greek thinkers such as Hippocrates suggested that persistent dreams could reveal hidden emotional concerns or physical conditions. This made dream intrusions a significant part of both spiritual and early medical understanding in that period. Experts believe that when dream images stay with us after waking, it's because our brain is processing memories and emotions. Dreams help our brain sort through experiences and adjust them into our waking thoughts, which is why some feelings or images linger. When dream intrusions last for a long time, they might be linked to unresolved emotions or stress. While they are usually not harmful, if they start to affect your daily life, they could be a sign of deeper emotional issues that might need help. Time compression refers to the phenomenon where a short period feels like it lasts much longer than it actually does. This can happen when the brain processes time differently due to certain experiences, emotions, or circumstances. For example, when you're engaged in an exciting activity, like watching a thrilling movie or playing a competitive game, hours might feel like they pass in just a few minutes. Similarly, during stressful moments, such as a job interview or a test, the few minutes on the clock might feel like they stretch on forever, even though time passes normally. Time compression happens because of how our brain processes information. When we are focused or emotional, our brain works harder to take in more details in a short time. This makes the event seem to last longer than it really does. The amygdala, a part of the brain that handles emotions, helps us feel time differently when we're stressed or excited. The hippocampus, which helps store memories, also plays a role by comparing what's happening now to past experiences, helping us judge the length of time. Studies show that when people are deeply focused on an activity, as explained by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's flow state, they often lose track of time. The brain becomes so engaged that it stops noticing time. This helps explain why time seems to fly when we're enjoying activities, like hobbies or spending time with friends. This idea has practical uses in psychology, education, and marketing. In education, using new and interesting tasks can help students stay engaged and focused. In marketing, companies use time compression to make their products more exciting, encouraging people to spend more time with them. In different cultures, time compression is often connected to spiritual or altered states of consciousness. In Buddhism, during deep meditation, people often feel like time doesn't exist. What feels like hours may only be minutes. In Western literature, stories like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and A Midsummer Night's Dream show how time can change during magical or emotional experiences, with characters feeling time differently due to supernatural events or strong emotions. Today, time compression is studied within the context of psychology and neuroscience, with modern theories focusing on how emotions, attention, and sensory input affect time perception. Not everyone experiences time compression in the same way. The extent to which it is felt can depend on individual differences in attention, emotional sensitivity, or environmental factors. Misplaced familiarity is when someone feels they know or have met a person, even though they've never interacted with them before. This feeling can be both comforting and confusing. For example, you might pass someone on the street and feel sure you know them, only to realize you've never seen them before. This phenomenon happens when the brain connects a new face to a memory it already has. Our minds are always trying to understand new things by comparing them to what we've seen before. If we meet someone who looks, sounds, or acts like someone we've met previously, our brain can trick us into thinking we already know them, even if we don't. Our brain uses special systems to recognize faces and remember past interactions. One key area involved is the fusiform face area, which helps us recognize faces. Sometimes, this area can make a mistake, causing us to feel like we've met someone before. This feeling can become stronger when there are other familiar social signals, like the person's body language, tone of voice, or even the setting, which may remind us of past experiences. This occurrence is fairly common and is most often triggered in situations where we are in new social environments or encountering people who look similar to individuals we already know. In many cultures, the feeling of misplaced familiarity has been interpreted as a sign of a past life or karmic connection. For example, in Hinduism and Buddhism, it is often believed that meeting someone who feels familiar could be a result of shared past life experiences. In Western traditions, this phenomenon is sometimes seen as a soul connection or a sign of fate, suggesting that two people are meant to cross paths in this life. Scientists believe that misplaced familiarity happens because the brain tries to recognize patterns, especially in social situations. This process isn't always perfect, and sometimes it creates false memories or feelings. While misplaced familiarity is typically harmless, it can sometimes lead to confusion or social discomfort. Individuals might feel awkward if they mistake someone for a friend or colleague, potentially leading to misunderstandings or strained interactions. Serial task confusion is a pattern in which a person starts a multi-step routine but carries out the steps in the wrong order. The person usually knows the correct sequence yet shifts steps unintentionally during daily activities such as cooking or preparing materials. The mix-up feels automatic rather than fully controlled. A common example is picking up a cup to drink before actually pouring the water, even though the person knows the water should come first. Serial task confusion happens when the brain has trouble keeping step-by-step actions in steady order. A sequence depends on working memory, attention, and familiar habits. When these systems face overload, tiredness, or distraction, the brain may activate a later step too early. One common reason is task intrusion. This means a future step pops into mind before the right time, and the person starts that step by mistake. Another reason is weak step boundaries. The brain usually marks when one step ends and the next begins, but stress or worry can make these markers unclear. Habit patterns also influence the mix-up. If two routines share similar steps, the stronger habit can take over and push the person into the wrong part of the sequence. One well-known study by Donald Norman and Tim Challies in 1986 looked at how people make mistakes in everyday tasks. They found that people are more likely to do steps in the wrong order when their memory is busy or when they are trying to pay attention to more than one thing at a time. This study showed that even simple routines can lead to skipped or mixed-up steps when the mind is overloaded. In the early 20th century, psychologists described task order mistakes as simple forgetfulness or carelessness. For example, pouring coffee before adding sugar was seen as lack of attention or low motivation. At that time, the brain mechanisms behind these errors were not yet understood, as formal cognitive models had not been developed. Current views treat serial task confusion as a normal outcome of limited cognitive resources. It has importance for safety training, workplace design, and daily planning because simple changes in environment and workload can reduce these errors. A reality microglitch is a brief moment when perception seems to break down. People may notice small inconsistencies in their surroundings or actions. These moments are subtle, often affecting only one person, and do not fully distort reality. For example, you might reach for a cup on your desk and find it slightly shifted from where you thought it was, making you pause for a moment. Reality microglitches happen because of how our brain and surroundings interact. The brain is always trying to make sense of what we see, hear, and feel. Sometimes, what we expect to happen and what actually happens do not match, causing a brief error in perception. Stress, tiredness, or paying close attention can make these moments more noticeable. They can happen when the brain remembers something slightly wrong or when the timing of events feels off, making reality seem a little unstable for a moment. Reports of minor perceptual inconsistencies date back centuries. In the 16th century, the philosopher Michel de Montaigne wrote about moments when familiar objects seemed slightly out of place or repeated unexpectedly. In the 19th century, psychologists like William James noted brief lapses in perception and attention in their studies of consciousness. In some cultures, microglitches are seen as signs of supernatural presence or messages from the universe. Online communities often discuss them as proof of simulation theory or alternate realities. These interpretations reflect human attempts to explain rare and unusual experiences. Current research focuses on understanding how the brain creates continuous reality. Microglitches offer insight into perception, memory, and attention. Scientists emphasize that while these experiences feel unusual, they are usually harmless and provide a window into the complex workings of the human mind. Hearing a voice echo in the head refers to the experience of perceiving your own inner voice as if it is repeating or resonating inside your mind. This is not the same as hearing external sounds. Most people experience it when thinking, reading silently, or recalling words they have said. For example, when you silently rehearse what to say before answering a question in class or imagine saying a line from a favorite song, you may notice your inner voice repeating in your mind. It is a normal aspect of human cognition and often goes unnoticed. The echo in the mind arises from the brain's processing of inner speech. When you speak silently to yourself, your brain activates areas responsible for both producing speech and understanding sound. The auditory cortex, which interprets sound, responds even without external noise. Working memory plays a key role by holding words temporarily, allowing the mind to replay them. Neural loops between the prefrontal cortex, which plans speech, and the auditory cortex create a feedback effect. This feedback can feel like a faint echo or repetition of the inner voice. Another factor is the brain's predictive system, which anticipates how words would sound if spoken aloud. This prediction interacts with memory to generate the perception of repetition. The experience of hearing a voice echo in the head is closely linked to the study of inner speech in psychology. The Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky was one of the first to describe inner speech as a key part of thinking in the 1930s. He suggested that silent speech develops from social speech and helps guide reasoning and self-control. Terms like internal monologue and subvocalization were later introduced in cognitive neuroscience to describe similar phenomena. Modern research shows that these echoes reflect brain activity in areas involved in speech production and auditory perception, confirming Vygotsky's early insights about self-directed thinking. Historically, philosophers and psychologists viewed inner speech as a silent guide for reasoning. Hearing your inner voice repeat is a normal cognitive process. It reflects the brain's capacity to simulate speech internally. Recognizing this can help understand thinking, memory, and how the mind processes language. An invisible object illusion occurs when a person thinks they see or sense something that is not actually present. This can happen in everyday life, such as noticing a shadow in a room that is empty or feeling a presence in a quiet space. It can also appear in controlled experiments where participants report seeing objects that were never placed in front of them. These illusions demonstrate that human perception can be mistaken, even when there is no external stimulus. Invisible object illusions come from studies in perception and cognitive psychology. In the late 19th century, psychologists like Gustav Fechner and Wilhelm Wundt showed that the brain can create visual impressions that do not exist. The term describes cases where people see objects that are not physically present. Experiments on attention, memory, and expectation show that the mind interprets incomplete information and sometimes generates experiences that feel real but have no external source. These illusions occur because the brain actively interprets sensory information, even when data is incomplete. The mind fills in gaps based on past experience, expectations, and context. For example, if a person expects to see an object in a familiar place, the brain may generate a false image. Neural activity in areas responsible for vision and attention can trigger the sensation of an object that is not there. Memory errors, suggestion, and stress can increase the likelihood of such illusions. The brain does not simply record reality. It constructs it, using available clues to create coherent, but sometimes inaccurate perceptions. In Japanese folklore, people sometimes report seeing objects or figures that are not physically present, interpreting them as spirits called yurei. In 19th century Europe, Victorian writings describe empty rooms where individuals claim to see floating objects or figures, often considered messages from the afterlife. These examples show that invisible object illusions occur across cultures and are interpreted according to local beliefs and social context. Understanding invisible object illusions shows that perception is not always reliable. They remind us to think carefully, question what we see, and recognize that the mind can create experiences as much as it perceives them. A phantom goal occurs when someone vividly remembers scoring a goal in a game they did not actually play. Many people describe the memory as clear and detailed. They can recall the moment of running, striking the ball, and the cheering crowd. The memory often feels real, as if it happened. People may even share the story with friends or family, believing in its truth. Historically, phantom experiences were often linked to folklore or spiritual beliefs. People sometimes thought such memories came from past lives or supernatural intervention. In modern times, psychologists have studied these experiences more closely. Reports of phantom goals are part of a wider set of phenomena called false memories. Sports culture, in particular, encourages vivid imagination and identification with athletes. This cultural context may make phantom goals more common in people who play or watch sports frequently. Research shows that the brain can create detailed memories without actual events occurring. This can happen through imagination, suggestion, or repeated exposure to stories and media. Mirror neurons may play a role, as they fire when someone observes or imagines an action. The hippocampus, responsible for memory formation, can combine real experiences with imagined ones, creating a memory that feels authentic. Psychologists also note that people have a tendency to fill gaps in memory with plausible details. Stress, excitement, or strong emotions during related experiences can strengthen these false memories. In sports fans or players, the mind may simulate goals during practice, games, or watching matches. Over time, these simulations can be recalled as personal achievements. Phantom memories are usually harmless. They may even provide a sense of joy or motivation. However, repeated confusion between real and imagined events can affect trust in memory. Being aware of how memories form can help people distinguish imagination from reality. Phantom goals highlight how perception and memory are linked. They show that the mind is not a perfect recorder of events. These experiences reveal the flexibility of memory and imagination. They also illustrate how humans construct personal narratives that mix fact and fiction. Spatial disorientation is a condition where a person loses the sense of direction, location, or movement. It often occurs indoors when visual and sensory cues become limited or confusing. People may feel turned around in large buildings, unfamiliar hallways, or windowless rooms. This confusion happens even though they are physically stationary and safe. A common example is walking out of an elevator in a mall and suddenly realizing you cannot remember which side you came from or which direction leads to the store you just visited, even though you only moved a short distance. The human brain depends on visual, vestibular, and proprioceptive systems to build a mental map of space. The visual system uses sight to track surroundings. The vestibular system inside the inner ear senses balance and motion. The proprioceptive system receives signals from muscles and joints about body position. When these systems do not align, the brain receives conflicting information. Indoors, the lack of natural light, identical corridors, or sudden changes in layout can disturb this coordination. For example, when someone walks through a series of similar rooms, the brain cannot rely on landmarks or external cues. As a result, the mental orientation drifts. The person might feel unsure which way they came from or where to go next. This effect can be stronger in dark, silent, or crowded spaces because fewer cues are available for correction. A 2017 study asked adults to navigate a virtual maze with and without visible landmarks. Participants with landmarks made fewer errors and reached the goal faster. Brain activity showed stronger left hemisphere activation during landmark navigation, suggesting the brain processes spatial information more efficiently. This shows that clear, distinctive landmarks help people navigate indoors accurately, while their absence increases errors and the risk of disorientation. In the past, spatial disorientation was mostly studied in pilots and sailors. It was seen as a problem linked to movement or flight. However, later research showed that even stationary individuals can experience it indoors. Today, designers and psychologists view spatial disorientation as a normal human limitation, not a flaw. Modern architecture now includes color codes, signage, and visible landmarks to help people navigate safely. Understanding this condition improves safety, comfort, and accessibility in everyday spaces. Mind blank at exam means a short period when a student cannot recall learned information during a test. The person feels that the memory is gone even though the knowledge is still present in the brain. It often happens suddenly, especially when facing a difficult question or time pressure. The person may know the answer later, after the test, showing that the problem is not real loss of memory but temporary inaccessibility. This condition is linked to stress responses in the brain. When a person feels threatened by exam pressure, the body releases stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. These chemicals prepare the body for action, but can also disturb normal thinking. High stress activates the amygdala, the part of the brain that handles fear, while reducing activity in the prefrontal cortex, which supports working memory and logical thinking. As a result, access to stored knowledge becomes blocked. One sub-process involves narrowing of attention. The person becomes focused on fear of failure instead of the question. This limits mental flexibility and makes it harder to retrieve information. Another sub-process is cognitive overload. Anxiety produces too many internal thoughts at once, such as self-doubt or worry about time. The working memory becomes crowded and cannot handle retrieval tasks efficiently. Together, these reactions make the mind appear blank. In many societies, mind blanking is seen as a sign of weakness or poor preparation. However, educators now recognize it as a common stress reaction rather than a personal fault. Some cultures link it to loss of balance or harmony between body and mind, stressing the need for calm focus before exams. The blank period usually lasts from a few seconds to several minutes. It often ends once the person relaxes or moves to another question. Frequent episodes can lower academic performance and confidence. Understanding this pattern helps teachers and students design better coping strategies such as breathing control, practice tests, and relaxation techniques. Blink-induced amnesia refers to the momentary forgetfulness that can occur when someone blinks, often forgetting what they were about to say or do right before the blink. This phenomenon is surprisingly common, but not widely discussed. It's as if the blink causes a brief reset in our thought process. For example, you might be in the middle of a conversation, about to tell someone something important, but then you blink, and suddenly, you have no idea what you were going to say. It's a small, yet frustrating experience that most of us have probably felt at some point. Blink-induced forgetfulness might seem like a modern oddity, but it's not new. For centuries, people have joked about losing their thoughts in the middle of conversations. In fact, the 19th century writer Charles Dickens humorously referenced lost words in his novels, while phrases like "I lost my train of thought" have been part of everyday language for ages. Historically, these moments were seen as quirky lapses, nothing more than human nature at play. But today, the connection between blinking and memory loss is becoming clearer. Research in the past few decades has started to explore how something as simple as blinking might cause brief disruptions in how we recall information, shifting the focus from a simple lapse to a more intriguing cognitive phenomenon. Blink-induced amnesia can be explained by how the brain processes information. When we blink, it momentarily interrupts the continuous flow of sensory input. The brain, especially the hippocampus, which is key to memory, needs a brief moment to catch up after the blink. This split second can cause a temporary disruption in memory retrieval, leading to forgetfulness. Studies have shown that during a blink, certain cognitive processes are briefly suspended, and this leads to difficulty recalling what was being thought or said. Blinks, although fast, can momentarily disconnect neural circuits involved in language and memory. The brain doesn't view blinking as a distraction, but rather as a necessary break for the eyes. While this momentary pause is essential for visual health, it also momentarily shifts focus, which can interrupt ongoing cognitive activities, like speech or recalling information. Blinking serves a protective, physiological function, but at the same time, it impacts our moment-to-moment memory. Blink-induced amnesia highlights how small, everyday actions can affect our cognitive processes in ways we rarely notice. Microsleep refers to brief episodes of sleep that last for only a few seconds, often going unnoticed by the individual. These episodes typically happen during moments of drowsiness, such as when someone is bored, fatigued, or engaged in monotonous tasks. For instance, imagine you're driving home after a long day of work, and suddenly your eyes close for a split second without you realizing it. You may not even remember it happening, but that brief moment of microsleep could lead to a dangerous lapse in attention. One notable case of microsleep involved long-haul truck drivers, who experienced momentary lapses in attention on the road. These tiny naps were linked to a series of dangerous accidents in the 1980s and 1990s, leading to increased safety protocols in transportation. Microsleep occurs when the brain experiences a sudden, unplanned shift from wakefulness to a sleep-like state. During this time, cognitive functions like attention and reaction time temporarily fade. A major cause of microsleep is insufficient rest. The brain, overwhelmed by fatigue, enters short bursts of sleep to cope with the lack of rest. When a person is not mentally engaged, the brain may enter microsleep to refresh itself. It's often seen in tasks like driving or watching TV. Microsleep also occurs in students during long study sessions or workers in high-stress jobs. It's often linked to a drop in performance and decision-making abilities. Microsleep affects various brain systems involved in alertness, such as the reticular activating system. The brain sleep-wake cycle plays a key role. Areas like the thalamus and prefrontal cortex are directly impacted. The buildup of adenosine, a chemical that promotes sleep, is often a factor. During microsleep, brainwaves show patterns similar to those seen in light sleep stages. Microsleep highlights the risks of sleep deprivation, especially in critical tasks like driving or operating machinery. Many people think they can snap out of microsleep quickly, but it can last for several seconds without the person realizing it. External factors, like the time of day or environment, can influence the likelihood of microsleep. Many people have experienced a sudden, involuntary jerk or twitch just as they are falling asleep. This phenomenon, often startling, is known as a hypnagogic jerk. It can feel as if the body is briefly shocked awake, leaving the person wondering why it happened. Is it a sign of something wrong, or is it just a normal part of the sleep process? The hypnagogic jerk has been noted throughout history, with different cultures offering various explanations. In ancient Greek and Roman traditions, it was believed that during sleep, the soul and body were in a delicate balance, and the sudden twitch signified the soul's brief departure or a disruption of this balance. This idea was rooted in a broader philosophical understanding of the mind-body connection, as discussed by figures like Hippocrates, whose concepts still influence modern medicine. Similarly, in ancient Chinese culture, particularly from 2000 BCE to the 14th century, the hypnagogic jerk was linked to energy flow and spiritual imbalance. Chinese medical philosophy viewed the body and soul as interconnected through forces like qi and the dualities of yin and yang. The twitch was often seen as a sign of imbalance or disruption in these forces, adding a spiritual or energetic layer to the experience. These cultural interpretations reflect the attempts to explain the mysterious bodily phenomenon during the transition to sleep. Hypnagogic jerks occur during the transition from wakefulness to sleep, particularly in the light stages of sleep. As the body relaxes, the brain may misinterpret the relaxation as a feeling of falling. This leads to a sudden muscle contraction, causing the jerk. The brain, still active and alert, can also send signals to the muscles that provoke the body to twitch. These jerks are a normal, albeit strange, response to the body's shifting state from wakefulness to sleep. From my own experience, I've felt the hypnagogic jerk a few times in the past, and it often felt like I was falling from a great height, like tumbling off a mountain or some other high place. Some people believe hypnagogic jerks signify anxiety or stress. Others associate them with a loss of control during sleep, reflecting deep emotional or psychological tension. Today, hypnagogic jerks are understood as a normal physiological response during the transition into sleep. While they can sometimes be unsettling, they are harmless. Sleep experts explain that they are more common in individuals who are sleep-deprived, stressed, or experiencing irregular sleep patterns. Although hypnagogic jerks are harmless, they can cause anxiety or frustration if they frequently disrupt the sleep process. However, most people eventually become accustomed to them, and over time, they tend to find them less troubling. Hyperphantasia refers to the condition of having exceptionally vivid and detailed mental imagery. It is the ability to visualize scenes, objects, or experiences with remarkable clarity, as though they were seen in real life. People with hyperphantasia experience a heightened visual imagination that is more intense than typical daydreaming or memory recall. For example, imagine closing your eyes and vividly seeing a sunset on a beach. The colors are so bright that you can almost feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, hear the sound of the waves crashing, and even smell the salty air. For someone with hyperphantasia, this type of mental image isn't just a fleeting thought, it feels as real as being there in the moment. The term hyperphantasia was introduced by psychologist Richard Cytowic in the 1990s. Cytowic explored the spectrum of mental imagery and coined the term to describe those with an extraordinarily vivid imagination. He based his research on individuals with visual imagery vividness, which is the degree of clarity one experiences when imagining things in the mind's eye. Throughout history, some famous individuals, such as Leonardo da Vinci and Albert Einstein, have been known to possess hyperphantasia, using their vivid mental imagery for creativity and problem-solving. In modern times, the concept is often discussed in artistic and creative communities, where people with hyperphantasia are regarded as having an enhanced ability to visualize their ideas. From a scientific perspective, hyperphantasia is thought to be linked to the brain's occipital lobe, which is responsible for visual processing. Research shows that people with hyperphantasia may have stronger neural connections in this area, allowing for greater mental visualizations. Neuroimaging studies also suggest that their brain activity closely mirrors the activity seen when actual visual stimuli are processed, suggesting the vividness is not just a passive mental process, but an active one. For individuals with hyperphantasia, this ability can lead to profound creative or cognitive experiences, but it can also sometimes be overwhelming, as their minds may be flooded with constant images. Hyperphantasia highlights the remarkable capacity of the human mind to create detailed and lifelike images, offering both creative potential and challenges for those who experience it. Imagine listening to a popular song on the radio. You sing along confidently, but later realize you were singing the wrong words. This common experience is called misheard lyrics. Many people encounter this without noticing it immediately. It happens more often when the music is loud, the vocals are fast, or the words are unclear. Misheard lyrics happen because of how the brain processes sound. When we listen to music, we try to match what we hear with familiar words. The brain fills in gaps when a word is unclear. This can create words that sound similar but have different meanings. Psychologists call this a form of auditory illusion. Our prior expectations, language knowledge, and attention levels influence what we hear. Mishearing is more common with homophones, unusual accents, or complex lyrics. Memory also plays a role. Once the brain interprets a line in a certain way, it may continue to hear it incorrectly even after reading the correct words. The main mechanism is the brain predicting words based on sounds. Listeners match the sound patterns to words they know. If the match is close enough, the brain accepts it as correct. The result is a misheard lyric that feels real. One famous example is hearing "sweet dreams are made of cheese" instead of "sweet dreams are made of this." Another is seeing a line about the girl with kaleidoscope eyes instead of the girl with colitis goes by. These examples spread widely because they are funny and relatable. Misheard lyrics show how perception is subjective. They remind us that reality is filtered through the mind. Even simple experiences like listening to music can reveal how the brain interprets the world in unexpected ways. False memory is when a person recalls an event or detail that did not actually occur or remembers it differently from the way it happened. These memories can feel real and vivid, even though they are inaccurate. False memories can involve small details or entire events. For example, you might be sure that you left your keys on the kitchen counter, but later realized they were actually in your bag all along. Research shows that false memories are widely present in everyday life. A well-known 2015 memory study reported that nearly 70% of participants developed a false memory after repeated suggestion. Children often accept suggested details more easily because their memory systems are still developing, while older adults can be influenced by confidence cues or social pressure. False memories also appear in real-world situations. For example, eyewitness studies show that many people confidently identify the wrong person when researchers insert a subtle hint or adjust the sequence of photos. These patterns suggest that false memories are not rare errors, but a common outcome of how memory reconstruction works in both simple daily tasks and high-stakes settings. False memories occur because memory is not a perfect recording of events. The brain reconstructs experiences each time they are recalled. The hippocampus and prefrontal cortex are key in forming and retrieving memories. Errors can happen during encoding, storage, or retrieval. When information is missing, the brain fills gaps using imagination, expectations, or suggestions from others. Stress, emotion, or repetition of inaccurate details can strengthen false memories. Neurotransmitters such as dopamine affect how memories are encoded, while sleep and attention influence their stability. Over time, the boundary between real and imagined events can blur, making false memories feel as real as true memories. Some theories suggest false memories may have an adaptive function. They could help the brain make sense of incomplete information or anticipate future events. These functions may have influenced human decision-making and problem-solving throughout history. Cultural or social interpretation. Social factors can shape false memories. Discussions, media, and collective storytelling can implant or reinforce incorrect memories. Cultural narratives influence what people are likely to remember or misremember. Peer pressure and authority figures can also increase the likelihood of false memories. Memory is reconstructive, not exact. What feels real may not always match reality, and this can shape personal and collective understanding of events. Name block is the experience of recognizing someone visually while being unable to remember their name. It occurs when the face is familiar, but the mental link to the proper name is temporarily lost. People often describe it as having the name on the tip of the tongue. Imagine meeting your old school friend at a party. You instantly recognize their face and remember all the fun times together, but for a few awkward seconds, their name just won't come to you. That's name block. Name block happens because faces and names are processed in different parts of the brain. The fusiform face area recognizes faces, while names are stored in the language centers in the temporal lobe. When the connection between these areas fails, often due to stress or distraction, recalling names becomes difficult. This is more common in older adults, as research by Dr. Elizabeth Loftus shows that memory retrieval slows with age, making it harder to remember names even though faces are recognized easily. Names are harder to recall than other information because they are arbitrary labels without much meaning. Unlike a person's occupation or personality, names carry little significance. The brain can recognize faces easily, but linking them to the correct name is harder, which leads to name block. Social habits can increase name block experiences. In cultures where meeting many new people is common, or where personal introductions are brief, the brain has less time to encode the name. Media and social networking can create visual familiarity without verbal reinforcement. In contrast, societies emphasizing repeated personal interactions or memory games tend to reduce the frequency of this phenomenon. The idea of name block was clearly described by Sigmund Freud in 1901 in his book The Psychopathology of Everyday Life. He used the Signorelli case to show how someone can recognize a person and recall the situation yet still fail to retrieve the name. It became one of the earliest documented examples of the gap between recognition and verbal recall. In modern times, the pattern is seen more often because people encounter many faces through online platforms. These repeated visual exposures create familiarity, but without hearing the names, retrieval becomes harder. As a result, name block appears more frequent today than in earlier periods. Name block shows that memory is selective and context-dependent. Recognizing someone is easier than recalling their name, and this gap is a normal part of human cognition. Phantom vibration is the sensation of your phone vibrating in your pocket or bag when it isn't actually vibrating. This phenomenon is commonly experienced by smartphone users, especially when they are in situations where they expect to receive notifications, such as during meetings or while waiting for important calls. The feeling is often brief and can be mistaken for an actual vibration, though no notification has occurred. Research indicates that phantom vibrations are a widespread experience, with studies showing that a large proportion of smartphone users, up to 70% in some surveys, report experiencing this phenomenon regularly. A study conducted by the University of Michigan found that nearly 90% of participants who checked their phones multiple times a day were more likely to experience phantom vibrations. This sensation occurs most frequently among individuals who are highly attached to their devices, especially those with frequent social media interactions, constant notifications, or work-related communication. The exact mechanisms behind phantom vibrations are not entirely understood, but they are believed to involve the brain's sensory processing system. When a person frequently checks their phone or expects a notification, the brain becomes conditioned to interpret certain sensory signals, like muscle twitches or static sensations, as vibrations. This may result in a misperception of a phone vibration when no external stimulus occurs. Additionally, the brain's expectation of feedback plays a role in amplifying this sensation. External factors such as high stress, sleep deprivation, or excessive phone use can heighten the likelihood of experiencing phantom vibrations. In environments where people are anxious about missing an important call or message, the brain may become hyper-aware of even the smallest physical sensations, misinterpreting them as phone vibrations. Historically, similar phenomena have been observed in other sensory experiences, like hearing a ringing phone that isn't actually ringing. With the rise of mobile phones, the sensation of phantom vibrations became a more recognized and studied issue. The phenomenon of phantom vibrations likely serves as an adaptive response to the increasing reliance on mobile technology. It can be viewed as a form of cognitive misinterpretation, where the brain mistakes routine bodily sensations for the expected feedback from the phone. The expression brain fart became widely recognized in English-speaking countries in the 1980s and 1990s, especially through television comedy shows and magazines. It described moments when someone forgets common facts or makes minor mental errors unexpectedly. Similar phenomena were mentioned much earlier in psychology and literature. For example, in the 17th century, John Locke described temporary lapses in memory and attention as normal aspects of human thinking. Later, early 20th century psychologists like William James studied attention failures and called them brief mental lapses. Although the term brain fart did not exist then, these observations show that sudden forgetfulness has long been part of human experience. Brain farts are linked to normal brain functioning. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for attention and decision-making, plays a major role. A temporary lapse in neural activity or a brief disruption in communication between brain regions can cause a momentary failure in recalling information. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine help regulate attention and memory, and fluctuations in their levels may trigger these mental blanks. Cognitive psychology suggests brain farts occur when working memory is overloaded or attention is diverted. The mind may focus on competing thoughts, leading to a brief gap in conscious retrieval of information. Stress, fatigue, and multitasking increase the likelihood of such lapses. Behavioral studies show people often experience brain farts in familiar situations where expectations are high, such as speaking in public or performing routine tasks under pressure. The phenomenon can be seen as the brain temporarily prioritizing other processes over memory recall. People describe brain farts as brief confusion, hesitation, or a feeling of the mind going blank. Observers may notice pauses, repeated words, or blank stares. These episodes are usually short and resolve spontaneously without long-term impact. Brain farts occur frequently across all age groups, but are most reported among adults aged 20 to 50. Surveys suggest that around 70% of adults experience at least one brief mental blank per week. Common triggers include acute stress, lack of sleep, or multitasking. Tasks that require rapid recall, like naming objects or remembering appointments, often provoke these episodes. People who work in high-pressure environments or handle complex information tend to report slightly higher rates of mental lapses. Today, brain farts are viewed as normal cognitive events rather than signs of serious impairment. They are considered part of everyday mental processing, illustrating the limits of attention and memory in daily life. Jamais vu is the phenomenon where a familiar situation or word suddenly feels unfamiliar. It is the opposite of déjà vu, where something new feels familiar. While déjà vu makes us think we've experienced something before, jamais vu makes familiar things feel completely new. People experiencing jamais vu may see common objects or read simple words and feel as though they are encountering them for the first time. This can lead to confusion or mild anxiety. The sensation is brief but vivid, making everyday experiences seem surreal. Studies show that repetitive tasks, such as saying the same word repeatedly, can trigger jamais vu. In experiments from the 1950s and 1960s, participants who repeated a word aloud began to perceive it as strange after a short time, suggesting the brain can disconnect recognition from perception. From a scientific perspective, jamais vu is linked to the brain's temporal lobe, which processes memory and familiarity. In these cases, the brain fails to signal familiarity correctly, making something known feel new. Research using fMRI scans from the 1990s shows that brief neural disruptions can cause this mismatch. The hippocampus, key to memory formation, plays a central role in this process. In literature, jamais vu illustrates alienation and the instability of perception. Authors like Kafka in The Trial and Beckett in Waiting for Godot depict characters encountering familiar places as strange, reflecting disconnection from reality. Writers use techniques like repetition and fragmented narratives to evoke this sensation, critiquing rationality, social norms, and memory reliability. Common triggers of jamais vu include fatigue, stress, and repetitive tasks. Understanding it offers insight into how the brain processes memories and helps distinguish ordinary cognitive disruptions from more serious conditions like epilepsy, where the sensation can occur more frequently.